I said, you wouldn't go around pretending to be you. Getting all your perks.
We are recording.
Maybe. That's all it is. Frank, I want you to drink it.
I'm not going to drink that.
You got it.
Yeah.
Try it and see if it's good. Just I don't have enough time. Preconceived notions of
I actually like the way it smells.
smells.
Yeah,
We are
I
recording.
like the way some coffee smells.
We're recording.
Right.
No talent on me.
Hello. I'd like to
I can't crack that into
open up our elected officials training.
because you got to click either.
For now, we won't open up the official meeting. We'll just do our training. All right. So tonight we are having some training from Daryl Child from our Olympus Insurance about errors and omissions. So, over to you. Thank you for being here.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, Mayor and Council. The topic tonight is avoiding public officials' errors and omissions. It's an area that we have grown to understand over the years, that as elected officials, as we're working within our official capacity, there are certain areas of vulnerability that we need to pay particular attention to. If I can figure this computer out. Just use the mouse. Okay. It's like this. Okay. We start with a little bit of background. Historically, as elected officials, we've been involved in the areas of approving budgets, setting policy and direction, ordinances, oversight, and administration. And yet we see over the years how these areas continue to grow and expand. And I'm not sure I'm doing this right here. Over here. Oh, okay. So as we look at the current responsibilities, we can see the field of what we become involved with as elected officials continues to grow, which means that areas upon which there could be errors or mistakes that transpire continue to grow exponentially as well. And I apologize, I'm not getting this exactly right with this.
You might be right clicking. Just bring it out here. Just tell us what.
Okay. Why don't we do that? Yeah, if we can move to the next slide there. We can see that the list goes on from just a few select items that we become more involved in more and different areas, all creating greater vulnerability. At the same time, I want to move forward a slide, we're being held to higher standards of accountability as elected officials. There's greater transparency and there's greater understanding of the public and holding us to higher standards of what they expect from us. All of this leads to a confluence of things that can occur from our decisions, which can result from challenges to those decisions and potentially public officials' errors and omissions, claims, or litigation. And this tracks with the trend. If we look at this graphic, you can see that in 1980, public officials' errors and omissions claims were extremely rare, and when they did occur, there was a few of them. They didn't cost very much to deal with. The line graph shows the number of claims. The bar graph shows the cost of those claims, and you can see that both of them have grown exponentially with the background that we talked about, an enlarged field of responsibility of elected officials and greater transparency and accountability expected from the public for our performance as elected officials. When we have claims that are related to public officials' errors and omissions, the largest component of those claims is legal defense. They become very costly because the litigation tends to go on and has a lot of complexity associated to it, as well as all of the interactions that may occur from a challenge. Public officials are protected in the current insurance program that we have for Kaysville City. There is embedded in that program specific coverage grants designed to protect the interest of public officials, administrative staff, and the city for the normal decision-making process that we make. So the good news is that even though we know that these can become more costly and we can be held to a greater level, there is insurance protection that has also grown and been put in place to deal with these things. There's 4 bullet points here that I highlight as well. And most of the claims occur in these areas, and this is what the insurance is designed to cover. Failure to perform in our duties, misstatements, violations of antitrust, negligent ministerial acts. And public officials are also protected for the things that we say, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in the course of this presentation today. Because as elected officials, sometimes people are going to take exception on how we say things and the way that they are presented and the potential that they could take, that they feel that they may have been damaged thereby. We'll go to the next one there. The public officials' management liability coverage covers the defense, as we showed in the prior slide. And even though the claims are very, very rare, they tend to go on for a number of years. The average claim when we have a public official's errors and omissions goes on for 8.5 years. We actually just have a couple of them that settled last year, and they went on a little bit longer than that. I had one that went on for almost 10 years and one that went on for 12 years. Thus, we can see that the legal costs can be extremely high as we're going through the process of facing a challenge when public officials' errors and omissions have a claim against them. So we come to the point of the topic for tonight. We know that these can be very costly, and we know the dynamic that we're facing as elected officials, higher accountability, higher standards. We're going to focus in on a few areas where the claims most frequently happen and what we can be thinking about or cognizant of elected officials to try and avoid those kind of situations and avoid this kind of litigation should it come our way. The most common claims against public officials, and we'll take these one at a time, is failure to follow a prescribed duty, undisclosed conflicts of interest, overreaching organizational authority, overreaching individual authority, violation of protected rights, and defamation, which largely means libel or slander by an individual or an allegation thereto. The failure to perform a prescribed duty largely means that as elected officials, we have certain duties that we prescribe for ourselves and for our city. We set certain things out that we will do and that we will perform. And if we fail in the performance of those duties, we can receive a challenge under a public official's errors and omissions. As a sidebar to this particular slide, we also need to recognize that there are times when we may have a fully prescribed set of duties on behalf of the elected officials, administrative staff, and employees, but that we may also, by procedure or by what we are doing, set duties for ourselves. And I'll give you a very good example. A few years ago, we had a public works director who wanted to be a very kindly individual and help some of the people that had challenges getting their dumpsters moved to the street. And so they would arrange to have dumpsters moved to the street. This was never prescribed officially, but it became something that people began to rely upon. One week this didn't happen, and a little old lady slipped and fell as she was trying to move her dumpster, and she said, well, this was really a duty of the city, and therefore you are responsible. And that claim was settled because it had become part of the normal expected prescription of things that they had counted on, even though it wasn't in our normal flow of things. So we had.
These are not examples from Kaysville City.
These are not. We're only going to talk about. We're only going to talk about actually one little sidebar that touches on a Kaysville claim, but that kind of illustrates how we need to be sensitive and aware, even when we're trying to do things well or do things on the extra mile. We have to be thinking about we may be creating duties for ourselves. We had another claim where one of our sewer districts, not the one that you are part of, had a policy where they were assisting the members of their district in cleaning out the laterals that went from their line to the house. They felt that some of the costs associated with that were a little bit burdensome for some individuals, and so they would try and help out and clean out lines. Once again, they started to create a duty for themselves that people began to rely upon, which later resulted in the expectation or the challenge that they had to start doing it for everybody or they had to discontinue doing it at all. And so we have to be very, very careful about how we prescribe our duties. And the next area that we focus in on is conflicts of interest. And I think it's pretty intuitive for us to, as elected officials, to know that when we as a governing body take a decision upon ourselves, that if we as individuals have certain things that could conflict or possibly have a personal interest in that decision, that represents potentially a fiduciary breach and a conflict of interest. One of the largest claims that occurred in the state of Utah, and this is a published claim, so I can talk about it. It wasn't in our client group, but the little town of Bryan Head many years ago had a lot of development going on within their town. And in the course of the development, there was a zoning decision that ultimately ended up in the hands of the city council. And the city council voted against this particular development. And the developer challenged that decision by saying that two of the members of the city council had a competing development within the town that had not been disclosed and had not been fully vetted out, or they hadn't recused themselves from making the decision. This went all the way through the appellate court level, and they finally found in favor of the developer that didn't get his development in to the tune of $1.8 million. In that particular situation, the judge awarded all of the potential profit that would have been realized had the development been allowed to go forward. In other words, they took the economic risk off the table. The development could have been built and maybe wouldn't have even been successful, and yet the judge awarded the full economic value to its ultimate in that particular situation. We've seen a number of other challenges where there may have been minor conflicts of interest. I know most cities have pretty well-defined procedures for disclosing conflicts of interest and for dealing with conflicts of interest. And this is just a very good reminder that we don't want to be ever put into that kind of situation. Overreaching organizational authority basically means that as an elected body, we have certain authorities within our budget capacity to deal with. And the largest claim is footnoted on the bottom of this slide, and it happened about 10 years ago against the city of Tooele that wanted to see a development occur within their community. They really wanted to see this particular development happen, and so they, as a city, made promises that they would make available to the developer water and water rights to make the whole development scheme work out. At the end of the day, when the development was all conceived and started to move forward, the city realized that they didn't have the water rights that they had promised to the developer. The developer challenged them and received ultimately an award of $22 million against the city for not delivering on the water that was necessary for their development to go forward. This is probably the largest public officials' errors and omissions claim that we've seen within the state of Utah. Overreaching individual authority, this largely means that when we interact with the public, and as elected officials, we want to interact with the public, we want their feedback, we want to have dialogue with those that we represent within the community. As we interact with the public, we have to be very, very careful of not committing our body to anything that we think should happen within the overall decision-making process of our city. We had one claim a few years ago where a very well-meaning mayor said, I really think I can sell the city council on this particular idea. But he couldn't. And it was recorded, and it was challenged, and it ended up into some very costly litigation. So we have to be very, very careful that we're not over-committing our organization individually in our dialogue and in our discussion. And sometimes we feel quite passionately about a particular issue that groups of citizens may bring forward to us, and we may have some very, very strong feelings. We just have to be careful not to overcommit our organization in that regard. A violation of protected rights. This basically means that when we have certain things that are prescribed by either the federal government or by statute that we as a community have to live by, that this can result in a challenge or a public official's errors and omissions claim. I make apology because we do have one reference to Kaysville here. This was the largest public officials claim from many years ago where a local company made challenge on a door-to-door ordinance or solicitation against the city, and it was later found that there were protected rights associated with that, resulting in a claim. The other two dealt with the Fair Housing Act, and these are both county claims where the local government, unbeknownst to them, had not been in harmony with the Federal Housing Act when they had made some decisions in regards to protected housing, resulting in damages that way. And now we move into the area of personal injury, libel, and slander. I put up on this particular slide, libel is written or published defamatory statements, and slander is defamation that is spoken. And defamation is a false statement that is presented as fact that causes injury or damages to the reputation of another. We have to be very, very careful as we talk about things, particularly things that we have strong feelings for, that we don't inadvertently say things that could be considered defamatory to other people. And I put another slide in here just to highlight the fact that we live in kind of an inverted world as elected officials, and I'm sure Nick is familiar with this, the New York Times versus Solomon, a very old historic case. But what this case basically says is that it's not a two-way street in regards to how we define defamation. The public can say some rather nasty things about us, and in the New York Times versus Sullivan case, they most likely are not committing defamation unless we could establish that they are actually trying to harm us with actual malice or ill will. The reverse isn't true. We're not protected as elected officials on the things that we may say about the public. So we have to be much more guarded in our speech, in the way we talk about things, the way we talk about people, and the way we talk about issues, than the public sometimes can be about us. The next slide that we put in here is just a reminder for all of us that we kind of live in a world where at times we have deteriorating civility. At times we see this in public discourse, and at times we see it in public meetings and in public gatherings. And we as public officials need to be the model of civility in all of our discourse and in all of the things that we do. And as we do, we also remind ourselves that we need to have full transparency in the way that we're undertaking and the way that we are working with other individuals. The world is far, far different today than it was even 10 or 15 years ago in regards to the transparency and the expectations of the public against us as elected officials. And because of that, we have to also be sensitive about things like discrimination. I think we've all seen in the news in recent vintage, there's been a lot of press about discrimination and about the way people feel that they've been treated by the public and by media figures and in other circumstances. And it's just a nice reminder for all of us that we need to be models of proper decorum in all of the things that we do because of the standards that are now expected of us as elected officials. Put a slide in here just to remind us that in the community, in the workplace, discrimination is or not having discrimination, I should say, is an expectation that is especially held to elected officials in every capacity. I put a slide in here too just to remind us as elected officials that as we work with local governments, we also do a lot of training. And I wanted just to give you a feel for some of the training that we perform and some of the elements that it contains. And harassment, as we train city staff, simply means unwanted advances, verbal or otherwise. And respect in the workplace and community comes in many different forms, but there's many areas that are just simply out of bounds as we train city employees and as we help them understand that behavior that maybe was once winked at or not even or recognized is no longer tolerable. I find it quite interesting that in our modern era that this has become the standard, and it's been that way for some time in local government. And I think in other elements of society, they're starting to finally catch up to what we have been performing in local government for many, many years. And who can commit harassment? Obviously, anyone can commit harassment. That's a slide from the office. I put an example in this next slide, too, of an ex-mayor down in San Diego who got himself out of bounds, 71-year-old mayor, and he pled guilty. He thought he was okay, but he was saying some inappropriate things to some of the staff members, and he ended up having some pretty serious consequences from his behavior. Those kind of things, those standards we just see are prevalent. It's probably one of the leading areas that we've seen significant claim settlements in the employment practices liability against local governments. I think we don't have to look very far in the media to see how much attention that this has been getting, within recent years. The final thing I wanted to do is just allow a few minutes after we've gone through all of these slides and ask if there were any questions or anything that we could maybe spend a few more minutes on. We kind of brushed through some things rather quickly and see if the mayor or council members, if you have any additional questions, I'd be glad to spend a few more minutes on those as well.
Okay. Council, any questions? Councilmember Barber.
So first on the overreaching organization authority, I'm just wondering, advice on the proper role of government, because a lot of times we want to be involved in shaping our city and how it looks and how it feels, but obviously we don't want to overreach the proper role. So if we have areas that we want to see developed a certain way or provide services to the city, is the closest level we can get to that in the zoning level or beyond that, in specifying what types of businesses we want to come?
And I think it's very clear from that example we used from the Twila City. They crossed a line where they actually made commitments or promises. I'm a big fan, I've been working in local government for many, many years, of city councils who take the time to revision themselves, who want to visit their vision and envision the kind of community that they want to be presently and in the future. All of that is perfectly appropriate, necessary, and very progressive. It's when we cross the line and we get caught up in our vision and we say, we will do such and such to try and facilitate that vision, when we don't have the capacity, financial or otherwise, to meet up with that. And sometimes we feel very, very strongly we would like to see certain things happen. I see this regularly as I visit city councils. I mean, we feel very strongly about our communities. We have certain things we want to see happen. We just have to be very careful not to overpromise what our capacities are in that regard.
So in the Twila example, is it that they overstepped their capacity because they didn't have the water rights that they had promised, but promising the water rights, had they had possession of them, that would have been okay?
It would have. They actually signed a development agreement, and in the development agreement, they had embedded in the agreement that there would be a deliverable, which they were not able to deliver.
Because a lot of times you hear developments where they have, like tax incentives to come, and we have lots of those neighboring cities that have done that. That's an appropriate level of
It is.
Of working
That's
together?
within your authority.
Okay. But if we had like specific businesses we really wanted to target to attract to our city, is that overreaching?
It's potential if you don't have the capacity to deliver that which you would. You might get someone who comes in and a really wonderful retail opportunity may come in, for example. If you, as a city, will do certain things to make that happen. It may be within your capacity to do that, and as you go through your normal review process, you do that. All of that is fine. It's when you're overreaching your capacity, you just simply don't have the ability to deliver that which you promised.
It has to be done as a body, not individually.
Exactly. And that was
Of
the other
course.
point, is that sometimes as elected officials, we can become quite enthused about a certain thing and maybe overpromise our influence even to our peers. I'm really sure my peers will go along with this, and people start to rely upon that, and we have to be very careful about that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so
All
much,
right.
Aaron.
We'll close our training session, and we'll have two minutes before we start again. Thank you.
I was just going to say, I'll go meet the Boy Scout.
I get a laugh all night about that. Also, for anybody who's interested in speaking on a particular item, new rules, we ask that you sign up ahead of time. So the sign-up sheets are out in the hallway if you would like to. Our public comment period is at the end of the evening. We try to finish before 10 p.m. Or if you want to speak to any of our action items, you may sign up to speak to an action item at that time. All right. We're going to like to open up the March 15th, 2018 City Council meeting. And first, I would like to have Anne Marie Atkinson give us our prayer.
Our dear, kind Heavenly Father, we humbly bow our heads before Thee this evening to thank Thee, first of all, for the blessing we have of living in a free country where we can have meetings like this and express our wishes. And dear Heavenly Father, please bless those that are our leaders and help them to work together so that they can make great decisions for this wonderful city. And thank Thee for all the blessings we have and for the moisture we've received today. We say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. I'd like to now invite members of Troop 854 to come and lead us in the pledge.
Will the audience please stand? Salute. Please follow me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we get to our official agenda, I'd like Anne-Marie Atkinson could you come forward with those that you've brought tonight? If you weren't here earlier, today is our sesquicentennial. That's our 150th birthday. And Anne-Marie has found all of these original Davis County outfits, historic outfits. Please introduce them.
All of them introduce themselves. I'm Becky Foster. I'm Naya Whitehead. I'm Erin Duncan. I'm Vivian Anderson. And I'm Bill. And we have all sorts of dresses around here, and we're working for creating our own outfits. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thank you for making... It made our sesquicentennial celebration even more special to have you here. I'd like to invite Brianne Christofferson to come forward to introduce our Miss Kaysville Fruit Heights royalty.
Hello. So I have Olivia Egan. She's my first attendant here, and we also are very privileged because Miss Utah Jessie Kate Riley also came to support us tonight, and then Brandon Stauffer is our executive director.
First of all, thank you so much for having us this evening, for your continued support of the Miss Kaysville Fruit Heights pageant. It's a great organization. We are local to the Miss Utah America and the Miss America pageant system, and I could go on hours and hours about the benefits of this pageant organization and the system, but instead I'm going to let these accomplished young women talk to you guys a little bit about it. We are hoping that over the next year we can increase the support coming from Kaysville from $1,200 a year to $2,000 a year. That would increase our scholarship fund. All the money goes directly to scholarships. So we're hoping that we can have that as a priority over the next year. So Brianne's got some things she's going to talk to you about.
So I kind of thought the best way to express my year so far was to show you through examples of things I've been able to do with my attendance. So at first I just wanted to point out the 4 points in the Miss America crown. People often mistake our pageant for a beauty pageant, and it is so much more than that. Our points on the crown represent service, style, scholarship, and success, so we try to utilize those 4 points in all of our actions, whether we're using one or all four at the same time. We try to really embrace those. So I just wanted to exemplify the past couple year title holders. This is Rachel Rose. She actually came tonight to support us, and she was able during her year to promote seatbelt safety and awareness. Julianne DeVries was, her service platform was incredible. It was called Live to Give, and she was able to do so many fun projects with that. And then me. So my platform is entitled Project Hero, which stands for Helping Everyone Reach Out. And it's a service and volunteerism-based platform that encourages people to get involved in their communities by utilizing their skills and their passions and their hobbies so that they are not only giving back to others, but they're benefiting themselves as well. And they're just overall gaining a lot of growth. These are some of our fun events at Cool Cars, Cold Cones. Me and my second attendant were actually able to collect, package, and deliver hygiene kits to those experiencing homelessness in downtown Salt Lake City. I was able to partner with United Way of Salt Lake and their Stuff the Bus event, we were able to stuff over 500 backpacks to send to kids who have, they live in low socioeconomic families, and they weren't able to get school supplies. So we were able to package these backpacks for them so that they felt included in going to school and that they didn't feel left out. I was also invited to attend the Open Doors grand opening, which is located right here in Davis County, and they really focus on just helping strengthen families. And one of my favorite places to volunteer is at their food pantry, actually. One event that I think we're all really proud of was our Cookies for Cancer event that we held this past year, and I think we kind of planned to make it an annual event for Miss Kaysville Fruit Heights. We were able to raise over $1,070 to donate to the Huntsman Cancer Institute to benefit families who are going through breast cancer. Some more pictures with cute Mindy. For Festival of Trees, one of my main goals this past year was to be able to give back to primary children in a way I hadn't been able to before. And I really wanted to donate a tree for Festival of Trees, and we were able to raise $546 for primary children just from our tree alone, which was really exciting. And Kaysville City Gives, I made it my mission to find as many items to donate to this as possible, and I was actually able to collect 12 bags of clothes from just families around Davis and Weber County, which was really fun. I recently partnered with Gigi's Playhouse, which is also a Davis County nonprofit organization. They are a Down Syndrome Achievement Center where I go weekly and volunteer there, and we also were able to partner with St. Anne's Center, and we donated food, and we were also able to collect hygiene kits to donate to those experiencing homelessness in downtown Ogden. My attendants and I were able to volunteer at the Night to Shine prom, honoring those with special needs in our community, and I think this has probably been a really, I think it was one of my favorite experiences. Olivia agrees. It was just really fun to get to interact with these people of all different backgrounds, and we kind of all came together for the same cause and to just celebrate and honor those with special needs, and it was a really humbling experience. And then our police officers, we love them. We also got to partner with them for Shop with a Cop, which was really fun seeing them to get out of their element. Not a lot of people get to see the fun side of our police officers, but I've been very lucky this year. Officer Stanford also invited me to speak at their graduations, and I've really loved doing that. It's just more pictures. We were able to host a Kaysville Princess Party supporting Children's Miracle Network, so Primary Children's is our local hospital, and we were able to collect about $250 to donate at our Princess Party, and it was just so fun to be able to interact with these girls and have them see the true meaning of being a princess. Everyone just thinks it's about being pretty and wearing this crown, but it's really about service work, and we were able to, I think we had about 100 Valentine's Day cards that we created, and I got to go and deliver them to local assisted living and nursing homes. Recently, I was able to partner with that IHOP National Pancake Day, and this is actually, her name's Nellie, and she is a patient at Primary Children's right now, so raising funds and having her there so people can see that this is what we are supporting. These are the kind of kids we want to help. These are the kinds of things we're doing with our platforms was really incredible. Last weekend, we were able to attend Miss Orem's Veterans Honor Ball. One thing people don't realize is that the Miss America system is so supportive, and my Miss Utah class sisters have done so many amazing things with their platforms, and I've just loved being able to partner with them and help them out in any way I can, because it truly is a sisterhood. That's what we're all about. We empower women. We provide. The Miss America system is actually the #1 provider of scholarships in the United States, which is incredible to say that we're getting to live this dream of serving our community and bettering ourselves. 4 years ago, when I started my journey in the Miss America organization, I would not have been caught dead up here. I probably wouldn't have even been at a city council meeting. I was a shy girl who couldn't speak. I was terrified of meeting new people, and through this experience, I've been able to meet so many incredible people in our community and really just reach out to other communities as well. I don't know how many times I've been volunteering in other locations in the state, and they're like, oh, I live in Kaysville, or oh, I live in Fruit Heights. It's so fun seeing you here. And I've met multiple girls who actually have been attendants or former Miss Kaysville Fruit Heights, which is really fun to run into as well. And then we just really love supporting our community. I have shoes at all these shoe boxes at all these places. And lastly, I just want you guys to know that right now I'm collecting shoes for Souls, and all of our Dropbox locations are at those places.
Good evening. I'm very excited to be here. I know that I'm just some random face with a crown and sparkles that has come to talk to you tonight, but I want you to understand who I am and why I'm here. So I'm going to start back when I was in second grade. How many of you have children? How many of you have a second grader? Anybody in this room? Second grade. Are we up here? Good. So one of the most exciting things about second grade is you are losing teeth. I was very different. I know, just imagine. I didn't lose any teeth, and I was much taller than everybody else. I also had ears that stuck forward, and I wore great big glasses. And I was a musician. No one really understood who I was, and they didn't appreciate me for who I was. I was bullied very severely, and it was so intense on my heart that I couldn't handle it. In third grade, does anyone have a third grader? 8, 9 years old? I had plastic surgery because I didn't appreciate who I was because no one else appreciated who I was. This continued on. 6th grade, all of these things were piling on, and I didn't understand how to accept them in myself. And I developed an anxiety disorder where I physically harmed myself in the form of pulling out my hair to relieve my stress. And I didn't know I was doing it. And as a 6th grader, that was heartbreaking because I wanted to look like everyone else. This continued on, and I found help, and I am proud of my story now. I'm proud of who I am, and I'm proud of the distance that I've come to be who I am. And one of the things that has really shaped my life is this program. When I was 16 years old in 2014, I met the most amazing person I've ever met in my entire life, and she is from Farmington. She is from Farmington, and she was Miss Farmington several years ago, and she later became Miss Utah. And while I was Miss Utah's Outstanding Teen, she was my mentor. She helped pass a bill for our state that helps educate youth about sex and sexual abuse so that they can be safer in their homes and in their families and in their communities. And she taught me that strong women with strong voices and strong stories can make a difference. And that's why I'm here before you today. I got involved in the program in 2014. I competed twice to be where I am. And now I'm sharing my platform, which is finding value in yourself across the state of Utah. So I've overcome the struggles that I had in my life so that I can impact those around me now. And I'm from Beaver. I don't know if any of you know where Beaver is. It's very small. And community is incredibly important to me. And so when Bree asked me to come and talk to her community about why this is so important, the first thought that came to me is, my community and how excited I would have been if they would have supported, me in that endeavor. I was never able to compete in Beaver because my family moved, but I still love and serve my community, and that my community is what shaped me to be who I am today. And I'm sure that Bree's community, Kaysville Fruit Heights, has been what has shaped her today as well. And that is why this organization is so important. We can show you pictures, we can tell you stories, and the only reason that you are really going to understand is you're going to see your children, and you want them to have a good role model. You want them to see some empowered young woman speak up and share her story. And that's why it's important. Bree's, like she said, each girl has a platform, and we throw that word around a lot in pageant land because we know what it means, but you don't. A platform is a personal issue with each individual girl that they choose. It's something that they're passionate about and that they want to serve their community in. So mine is finding value within. Bree's is Project Hero, helping others reach out and do service and work in the community. And that's what's so special about the organization. You can say, well, we've had a Miss Kaysville Fruit Heights. We've had 3 of them, and I know all 3 personally. But we've had 3 of them, and they've done plenty. But you need to continue this because each girl brings something new to the table. It doesn't matter that she goes to Miss Utah. It doesn't matter that she becomes Miss Utah because I am Miss Utah, and I can't get everywhere. But these girls are representing me in their communities, and they're doing far more than I ever could have. I was challenged to write what Miss Utah was, what the organization was, and I just wanted to share it with you. Miss Utah is more than just a sash, more than just a crown, more than dresses and shoes, more than photos and autograph, which is what we all see. She's a servant to her state and her community, her peers, her public, her organization, and her nation. Some think that Miss Utah spends most of her time wearing heels and posting on social media, but the most important moments of her years are the moments you will probably never see. Her most important job is the one-on-one conversations held with a new peer, the quiet moments spent carefully preparing each day and every word she says to an audience. Her time spent on her knees praying that not only for the strength to endure her year of ups and downs and unknown trials, but for the ups and downs and trials of each of her audience members as well as her sister queens across the state and nation. To be Miss Utah, having a hard time. To be Miss Utah, you must first learn how to do these things without a crown. And that's why these people are so important. They're showing you, they're being an example. It takes years of dedication, preparation, and thought. This is not just to prepare your body for the swimsuit competition, but to prepare your heart for the incredible souls you will meet and come in contact with, like Nellie. Miss Utah is not one person. She is the face of innumerable volunteers. This is all run by volunteers. Families and friends who have shaped her into a leader. She is fierce. She is strong. She is unstoppable. She is a storm. But most importantly, she is real and relatable and an example to your community. And that's why I would encourage you to really take this seriously. Sometimes we see a crown and a sash and a smile and heels, and we put it off as sexism or, it's outdated, but it's not. I think it's more important than ever because we need strong, empowered women because we are the future leaders of tomorrow. Thank you.
I just want to thank you guys for letting us speak tonight, and I just really want to thank you for my opportunity to be Miss Kaysville Fruit Heights 2017. This role has really altered my life and has really changed me for the better, and I'm really grateful for that experience, and I'm really excited to continue this journey and to continue promoting not only my platform, but empowering women throughout the state of Utah. This organization has created so much good, and so many great things have happened to not only our country by these women, but also so many individual people have altered their lives. So we just want to thank you guys, and if you have any questions, we are able to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Barber, do you have a question?
I do, actually. That's what I was thinking about. So you're asking for an increase from $1,200 to $2,000?
Yes.
That comes just straight from the city?
I think we're going to probably talk about that when we talk about the budget.
Oh, okay.
Is what I'm assuming.
And that money that is donated or should be increased goes straight to scholarships used within our city?
Yes. So the queen, the Miss Kaysville Fruit Heights, will get $1,000, and then each attendant will get $500 each.
And that's the only source for your scholarships? There's not other money that comes in?
So all of our budget is through sponsorships, ticket sales. Okay. Fruit Heights also provides a small amount of scholarship money as well that we use for the scholarship fund. The Miss America guidelines say that we have to have a fund that goes for 3 years. So we use that extra that comes from Fruit Heights to build the fund. Otherwise, we would be against the Miss America rules. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming and giving us more information on the Miss Kaysville Fruit Heights and the Miss Utah, because that was enlightening. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. And now we would like to have John Cowan and Pat Brown to speak to us about the National Service Recognition Day.
Well, thank you very much for letting us be here. We'd just like to take a moment of your time to talk to you a little bit about National Service Recognition Day. So National Service Recognition Day is a bipartisan effort to recognize the positive impact of national service and to thank those who serve and to encourage more citizens to give back to their communities. And this day is sponsored by the Corporation for National and Community Service, CNCS, which is who we are representing, in addition to the National League of Cities, National Association of Counties, and Cities of Service. And so we represent RSVP, and that's the Retired and Senior Volunteer Program. And so here in Davis County, we have over 450 volunteers over the age of 55 who commit their time to over 26 different locations throughout the county providing service. And with National Service Recognition Day, that's taking place on April 3rd, and local cities and communities actually throughout the nation are going to be recognizing this day. And the goal of this day is threefold: to thank National Service members for their commitment and impact, to highlight how local leaders use National Service to solve their toughest challenges, and 3, to build public awareness about the impact of National Service. And so that's why we're here today, and we appreciate your consideration for that. I've asked Pat to tell a little bit about her experience with RSVP, since she's been working with that program for several years now.
Thank you so much for letting us come visit with you tonight. I am the program coordinator for the RSVP program here in Davis County, and as John said, we have over 400 volunteers age 55 and older. During the last year alone, those volunteers have contributed more than $1 million worth of service to Davis County. And as wonderful as that is, and they've helped a lot of different organizations, from the animal shelter to the food pantries, both food pantries, to elementary schools, to both hospitals. They're doing some really good work out there. But even better than the amount of dollars that they have contributed to the county, it is beneficial to the county, but it's just as beneficial to those volunteers who are out there. Gives them a reason to get up in the morning. Our volunteers are seniors, of course, in RSVP, and they need to feel needed. They need to feel they have something to contribute. So it helps the volunteers as much as it helps the county.
Thank you, Pat. It really is a wonderful program, and we appreciate your consideration. I understand you're proposing to sign a proclamation in support of this, and so we hope you'll do that. In addition, I just want to emphasize that given the many challenges facing local communities and cities, more and more are turning to volunteerism as a cost-effective means to address those needs. And so we really hope that you'll support this effort, and we appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And council members, I just want to let you know that I stopped by the senior center next door, and they would like us to hopefully participate in Meals on Wheels sometime in the near future. And that was one way that we can do something of service right here in our community. So we'll talk about that and find time that we can go and get out and meet some of our seniors and others who get Meals on Wheels. So thank you.
Thank you very much. If you'd like, I also brought some material that talks about senior services, which is who we're with. We're with Davis County Senior Services as part of the health department, and also just a little fact sheet about kind of our top notes from this past year for RSVP. Is
That's
that all right
great.
if I leave these?
Yes, please. That would be great. Yeah, just thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay. All right. Next, we'll have our Chief Oberg to present the Kaysville Police Department annual report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Appreciate you giving us a few minutes tonight to talk about our annual report, the state of the police department. I sent you an electronic version of this, but if you'd like a hard copy, I've got some in the back. Let me know. I hope you've had a chance to look at it, and if you have any questions, please ask them of me, and I'll do my best to answer them. I'll just kind of summarize this, go through it a little bit, and maybe that'll pique some questions. But if not, that's okay too. So after our mission statement, I've kind of compiled a summary of the calls we take and the type of calls. I've done a comparison to 2017 versus 2016 and kind of tried to show a little bit of a one-year trend, whether they've gone up or down, just to give you a little bit of a snapshot of kind of what we deal with. On the next page, I show a graph of the number of arrests we've made in the last few years, as well as kind of the top 10 cases we deal with. I've put some traffic statistics there. I wanted to just touch on this a little bit because last year, Council Member Page kind of talked to me about our lower traffic numbers and whether I felt that impacted our number of accidents, and which I did believe it impacted those accidents. And you can see our traffic's gone up a little bit more in line with what it has in years past, and our accidents actually have come down a little bit too. So just kind of a gee whiz maybe with our conversation last year, and hopefully this next year we'll be able to do even a little bit more. 2016 was a rough year for us as far as personnel goes, because we had a lot of turnover and attrition and injuries and illnesses, and for much of the summertime we were down, I think, 6 employees, which out of a small department is pretty devastating for us. But I think we turned out some pretty good work despite that, and we're at full strength now for the first time in a couple of years, and I think things are firing on all cylinders, so I would expect this to look even a little bit better next year. I'm probably jinxing us, but that's my hope. I skipped one page, and I'll come back to it. Page 8, I want to talk a little bit more towards the end, but it kind of shows the time of day that we have a lot of our calls. I have a little recap on some of our investigations, cases that our detectives handle. That's stayed pretty in line with years past, except for our child abuse and neglect reports that we get. We get those from the Division of Child and Family Services. Those are cases filed with them that we work with them. Those have gone up, and I don't know what the good answer is to resolve those. But and then one thing I put in on page 13 that I haven't had in years past, and I don't know if it's of value to you or not, but I tried to put in some of the grant funding that we received, because that seems to have been a common theme the last couple of years, some discussions in council meetings. So as you can see, we did get a lot of grant funding, and we've taken advantage of a lot of that. One of note in particular is the Victims Advocate Services at the bottom for $128,000. That's a 2-year grant that we received, and I brought our Victims Advocate with us. I'd like her to talk to you for just a few minutes. In fact, it's actually part of her grant requirements that she does do a presentation to City Council. But before we have her speak, I really just wrapped up our annual report with some details about our department awards, some trainings that we've done, and some external awards that we received. Just kind of more fun, gee whiz stuff.
Chief?
Yes?
Will your award...
No.
No? That will not be in next year's report? Because it was in January, I know.
Yeah.
So it'll be next year.
Yeah, we'll add it
in next year's report. Got it.
We'll see.
I was looking for it. It was noticeably absent.
See, the benefit is that I kind of get to edit this too. So one thing we didn't do this year is the last few years we've done a sex abuse kind of symposium, and we weren't really able to get that to come together this year, but we did something that I thought was it's very similar and equally beneficial. Is we did a kind of a community training on opioids and some of the problems we've had with that, and we had some experts, some people that live in our city that are experts in their field come in and do a panel discussion, and it was very well received from the community. And this year we also trained our officers on dispensing Narcan, and I was surprised at how many times we actually used it. I think off the top of our heads, we recalled 6 instances where our officers were able to go on scene and revive somebody who was overdosing. So that definitely makes an impact on families and communities, and it's something that we're not immune to here in Kaysville. So going back just to our page 8, the police service calls and when they come in, you can see in the middle there, Monday through Friday, from 8 to about 6 o'clock, is a darker area on this graph. And that we identified as that's our busy time. We get a ton of calls during that time. And that's been consistent from year to year to year. And kind of going along with success framework, which is something we've talked about a lot too in these council chambers in a project of Councilman Garnes. We looked at those cases, and in 2016, out of the 8,400 calls for service we had, we figured that about 40% of those calls happened during that block, that Monday through Friday block, from about 8:30 to 5. And out of about that 40%, about half of those could have been handled by an officer on scene, and ended up being cases where we called an officer out from the street, from whether they were running radar or whatever they were doing on the street, to drive back into the station, call the complainant back or meet with the citizen at the station, and then go back out to what they were doing. And we determined it was pretty inefficient, really. And so having the public come in and tell their story to a civilian employee, while that sounds good, because a civilian employee is generally cheaper than a sworn officer, it really wasn't cheaper in the long run because of the time it took for the citizen, to tell the story to the civilian employee, for the civilian employee to call the officer in on the street, have him or her come in, and then you've got the gas expenditures and things like that. And aside from the fact it's just not our best service if we're kind of, I don't want to say wasting the public's time, but not using it as best as we can. So this past year we spent some time and resources to get that position changed over to a sworn officer position, and we really haven't implemented that until just this week. So we don't have the details of that in here, and so I didn't put them in here, but I wanted to mention it because Success Framework has been something we've been working on as a city and as a department. If you'll humor me for a minute, I'll have Jennifer Winchester come up and speak to you about her program, and then I'll be here to answer any questions we have. We hired her in July and basically just kind of said, we don't know what this is supposed to look like, but figure it out. And she has done a fantastic job. So this is Jennifer Winchester.
Hi.
Hi, Jennifer.
Yeah, as he said, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So part of my grant is that I need to present to let people know that this program exists. So I'm just going to kind of describe what I do. So victim advocate, basically, have any of you guys ever had a really bad day? Okay. So we've all had bad days. So take your bad day, mix in the police, maybe medical, going to court. It sounds like a really tough day, right? It's not something that most people want to deal with. So my job comes in where I help a victim figure out what it is they need to do next. So we go through, we do a needs assessment, see if they need counseling. I inform them of their rights as victims and then help them exercise their rights, whether that be going through court and being heard, any of those things, sit in with an officer and just kind of provide emotional support. The different type of crimes, so our grant is funded for any type of victim. The most prevalent since we've started have been domestic violence victims, stalking harassment victims, and sexual assault victims that we've worked with. Work with all age groups, male, female. My youngest victim so far has been 1. My oldest has been 76. Some of the services, like I said, that I offer: safety planning, referrals. I've even helped people where they've had to miss work because they've been assaulted, and given them notes to bring back to work, things of that nature. Since the program began, I was hired in August. Went to training. I've done a lot of training. Since the program's begun, we've done 108 victims I've dealt with. And it's averaging out to about 26 victims per month that we work with. Do you have any questions?
Councilmember Gurn.
Thank you. So I noticed, there's a federal grant that came with this. It sounds like so much of what you do is counseling, working with people one-on-one, helping them through their issues. But with the federal grant, is there data that is part of your job that you have to keep data and report back to justify the grant? And does it continue, I guess, if it looks like you're getting the results that are expected, that you can then extend the grant, or how does that work?
Yes, it does. So I have to keep track of everything I do, whether it's provide a referral, go to court with a victim, anything to that nature. And we have a certain number that we have to meet every quarter. So far, we've exceeded our expectations for the year on our victims. And it's a 2-year grant cycle, so I report every quarter, and from what I've seen, it's typically renewed as long as the program's going well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Any questions for Chief Oberg? Councilmember Gurn?
So I do have one question, if I can remember where I wrote it down here. One thing I've noticed, probably, and I just wonder if you would corroborate this internally, when you get complaints, maybe not complaints or a call that you have to go out, but just complaints from the public generally, where do most of those complaints, in what area do most of those complaints come from?
Suspicious type circumstances or suspicious people are the gist of most of the complaints we get. And off the top of my head, I think we took about 1,200 of those. So a complaint of, hey, I saw a strange person walking through my neighborhood I've never seen before, all the way to I heard, in the middle of the night calling us saying, I hear something in my house. So a suspicious circumstance or person complaint is kind of a broad complaint, but that's our high number for us.
Okay, and that would make sense. I'm thinking, do you get? It would make sense that as a city council person, I wouldn't get too many complaints from citizens that people know they need to go to their police department. But I do hear a lot of traffic complaints, like, why isn't there an officer on this corner of the street, on my street, giving tickets to all the people who are constantly speeding down the street? Do you get those kinds of
We do.
calls as well
We get a
sometimes?
lot of traffic complaints, and we've struggled the last couple of years to be able to have a kind of a dedicated officer to be our traffic officer. And just this past about, I think, January 1, we finally, I think, are staffed to be able to do that. So we'll have a point of contact for all traffic complaints and somebody who can better manage those, so to speak, and help. I met with him today, in fact, and told him some of the things I wanted him to do were to identify our high accident areas and to figure out why the accidents were occurring there and to be proactive and try to prevent some more accidents, as well as to just better manage all of our traffic complaints, because we get them on all days and times, and different officers take them, and we have a huge list of all the areas in the city that people that want traffic enforcement in their neighborhood, and our response to that is not as good as it could be if we had one person that was kind of managing this and making sure week to week that we were actually doing some of those things instead of, just it kind of falls to the bottom of the pile as a patrol officer. You take the calls that are coming in, and if you have time to do traffic or some of these other things, then you do it when you have time. But hopefully having this one person dedicated to this, we'll be able to do a better job with that. But traffic with our communities becoming more and more of a problem. And ironically, when I think it was either last council meeting or the one before, when we were approving, I can't remember the name of the development, but some of the community got up and they were complaining about traffic, and I was standing in the doorway talking to someone outside, and he was complaining to me about that we do too much traffic. And I said, did you hear what they're saying
Meaning
in there
too
right
much,
now?
Too much traffic.
Too much traffic
Patrolling.
enforcement.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. And he said no, and I said, hold on one second. And he sat and listened, and he said, well, all right, I guess you guys can't, you can't win no matter what you do. But this one area, you're doing too much.
Because I like to speed there, so don't come.
Yeah. Too much, and electric speeding. But.
And trying to find, and I think there is a magic number. I mean, I really don't want to be the police department that's just hammering our public with citations. There's got to be, I would love to know what the magic number is on enforcement, on traffic stops and citations, because that would make my job so much easier. But we're just trying to find that good balance, and I don't know that we'll ever find the balance as far as numbers go, but I do think we can do a better job as far as managing the complaints and our responses to them, and that's my hope that this next year will reflect some of that.
And just one more question. It sounds like that's really going to make a difference to have, you probably haven't seen that yet, but it'll make a real difference to have one person whose job description is to kind of coordinate and be responsible for, assessing those results and seeing where that's going. But that leads to the thing, what you said about some people have told me that maybe we need less traffic enforcement, leads to my last question, and that is, it seems like nationally there's, and I think these things go in cycles, but it's almost, I think if a young person is thinking about going into police work, they'd almost second guess it because of all the scrutiny of police forces nationwide, and sort of this issue of maybe police officers are doing too much. They're filling quotas, or they're just looking to give citations or looking to arrest people or whatever. But, in Kaysville, I would think that would be a little different, and I'm just wondering your impression of the people's attitude in Kaysville towards law enforcement. I'll just bias this question by saying when I grew up, we idolized being a baby boomer, and that, I just idolized law enforcement, the military, and people who serve us and protect us and put their lives on the line. But I see some things that maybe that's people, and not as many people feel that way. But what's your sense of the community?
We're lucky. We're fortunate. We have a very supportive community, and it's a community that wants to partner with us on public safety problems and solutions, and that's been fantastic. But the public sentiment is really hurting us as far as recruitment and retention, and it is incredibly difficult to find anybody who wants to do this job out there. And I've had a lot of discussions with our city manager about the state of policing right now, in that good departments with good leadership are just not able to find people to work for them. And every department is kind of trying to one-up each other because there are no candidates coming out of the police academies, not enough to fill these jobs. And so what we're doing is we're just stealing from each other. And so officers, it's really, when I was coming in as an officer, it was tough to get a job. And if you got let go or fired, you were never getting back in the business. You kind of had the, strike against you, and you were done. But now it is so hard to find anybody to do this job, and it's tough for me to try to compete with other cities because I can only do so much, and if they can go 10 minutes away and police in a city 10 minutes away and get more money or better benefits or something, why wouldn't they? And that's what we're all facing as police leaders. And it's every day I get another flyer sent to me from another department about what they're offering, and our officers get phone calls daily because other departments pay their officers to recruit people to them. And so there's a monetary incentive for these officers to call our officers and say, hey, have you ever thought about coming over here or coming over here? How much is your insurance, or how much are you getting paid? Because this is what I'm getting. And I get other departments calling me and saying, do you know of anybody out there who is a candidate? Because they're just not there. I spoke with one of our neighboring chiefs who told me he calls, and a lot of chiefs are doing this, they call the post, the police academy, and they reserve spots knowing that they don't have anybody to send there yet, but they're hoping to just find somebody to send to the police academy. And then so agencies like us, when I went to send somebody through, one of our last hires, they were full. Well, they were full of these imaginary spots that these other departments had reserved because they're hoping to find somebody to send. It really is, the public sentiment hurts us probably the most, but the fact that the economy is doing well and the military recruiting is up, and whenever that's up, we tend to compete for people. Some of these people that are drawn to the military are also drawn to police service, and when military recruiting's down, then we tend to fare better in our recruiting, and when the economy's down, we do okay. But with the public sentiment, the pension reform, and these other factors all hitting us at once, and in addition to the fact that many agencies, as the Wasatch Front grows, a lot of agencies are adding officers, and so I think Salt Lake is adding 50, Unified Police Department's adding a lot. There's a lot of agencies adding personnel at the same time that the police academies really aren't putting out a lot of people, and a lot of our young people, you used to get in and it was a 20-year retirement, and you'd get 8 years and you'd start to struggle, but you're almost halfway there. But now you get to that point and you still have almost 20 years to go, and they're just getting out of the business entirely. And so we're not even salvaging these 5, 7, 8 year cops.
And to be clear, that's a statewide issue, right? I mean, that's state
Absolutely.
Controls, and they've watered that down quite a bit. The state
Absolutely. From all the way from St. George to Logan, it is a problem for all the police departments, sheriff's offices. It is really it's gonna be a crisis here really soon. The Chiefs of Police Association estimates that we will be at 1,000 officer shortage by the end of this year, and most of that impact is going to really be here in the Wasatch Front, and I don't have a solution for it. What we try to do is, like our last council meeting, I was speaking in the back with a 16-year-old girl who was interested in policing, thinking, okay, 5 years. And I told her, okay, keep your nose clean and keep in contact with me, because our last 4, we've been fortunate because our last 4 officers we've hired have been people that we groomed years and years ago and spent time with them as reserve officers before they went to another police department, or 2 of them through the Citizens Academy that we participate in. I spent time meeting with them several times and having them come out and ride with our officers, and that's paid big dividends for us, but it's running out. And officers used to spend 30 years in the job, even though they could retire at 20, but my generation of officers leaving all the time. A couple last month, 1 week, there were 3 officers that I'd worked with retired in 1 week, and they're just going.
So that just confirms that even though Kaysville was ranked the safest city in Utah in 2017, that we're not immune from all these issues statewide and nationwide.
No. We aren't, and we've been fortunate thus far, and I hope it continues. But I'm very concerned about our department moving forward, our ability to retain the talent that we have. So,
thank you.
All right. I have one last question.
Yes.
So the metric of heard you say you're fully staffed right now.
Yes.
And so what threshold do we try to be at? Because obviously we see the city's doing really well, and the hope would be that we would keep that flourishing, but obviously keep it just the right minimum where we're not overspending or overstaffed. We're also not understaffed.
Well, I think if you look at our calls for service numbers that we took, it's on page 7. We took an all-time high on calls this past year, and that is a concerning trend for me, is that we are getting busier and busier, and we're getting more and more demands on us. And I do think that, I hate to say we need to keep up with 1 per 1,000 population. That's a number that's thrown out a lot, but I do think we need to be talking about adding a few officers in the next couple of years to just keep pace with where we're at. My worry is that I should have brought last year's book too, but the last few years our crime index per 1,000 population has gone up. So we're slowly becoming a less and less safe city. And another number I'm concerned about, and I've talked to my people about, trying to find what page it's on, but our response time to emergencies is not where I'd like it to be either. It's at about 8 minutes, and that's because if our officers are tied up on other things and an emergency comes out, some of those things they can't disengage from, and even if it is a call that they can disengage from, it takes time. It slows our response to an emergency, and as a public safety chief, that's concerning to me. That I would like to see us more around 5 minutes for a response time. I think that's more acceptable in the size of city we are geographically. So we do definitely need to start having the discussion about adding officers, and our schools are becoming more and more, I don't want to say problematic, but we're needing to spend a lot more time and resources in our schools, which is impacting us in a lot of different ways. I almost need a sergeant to manage all of our officers that spend time in our 19 schools. I mean, I think we have about as many schools as Layton City does, and we have about half as many officers, probably less than half. And we're just stretched incredibly thin as far as our commitment to our school children and our our educational institutions go.
So,
Councilmember Garner. Thank you.
Mayor granted me one more quick question. So recently there were some state bills that passed that said you can't use anything that might be considered to be a quota. So as you're hiring, as you're getting to hire new officers, if you can't look at some of this data by officer, how do you assess an officer's performance when you're hiring? Has that been a problem, and how do you work around that?
Well, I think that we can use that information to some degree. We can't, the ways that we can't use it are ways that I never used it anyway. So I've never told our officers, you have to give me 1 ticket a day or anything like that. What I've always said is I expect you to be able to show what you're doing throughout the day, because we have some officers who love traffic enforcement, and that's their passion, and they're out saving lives by changing behavior. And if that's their passion, I would love them to do that. And I don't expect everybody, nor do I want everybody to be doing that. And I have other officers who are passionate about building community partnerships, and I have other officers who just want to find drug offenders, and it's the variety of that makes us a good department. And so while we certainly look at everything we do, we try to account for more of their time spent rather than necessarily what they're doing. So like the officer who is our point of contact for traffic right now and doing our traffic enforcement, he's a fantastic traffic enforcement officer. That's his passion, and so he's a natural fit in that. I was never great with that, and I probably would have been a horrible traffic officer, but I would, my passion was elsewhere, and so does that answer?
It does, thank you. And it really looks to me like you're doing a fantastic job with so many officers receiving awards and the statistics that are coming out and how you're handling it. I, for one, greatly appreciate what you're doing, Chief, and all of your officers as well.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Chief. We appreciate your time, and thanks to your officers as well.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Now, declaration of any conflicts of interest. Anybody tonight? No? Okay. All right. Consent items. Would anybody like to pull anything from the consent agenda? Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the consent items.
I'll second that.
Okay. It's been moved by Councilmember Garn and seconded by Councilmember Page. All in favor, starting with Councilmember Garn.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay. Aye. Aye.
Okay. Motion passes 4-1. Okay. Next, we are going to our action items. Are the sign-up sheets still out?
No, and there's no. I have them here, and there's nobody that signed.
Okay. All right. Okay. First, we will have final plat approval for the Cityside Townhomes subdivision.
This property is located on 2nd West, just behind the post office, highlighted there in yellow. The property was rezoned. Well, it's been zoned to RM for some times, which is residential multifamily. Several months ago, they came in and got a preliminary plat approved. That preliminary plat looked like this. It consisted of 12 units in 3 buildings in a townhome type configuration. Each of the pads could be sold separately, so there could be 12 individual lots platted. They've now completed the engineering and submitted for final plat approval. This was reviewed by the Planning Commission and recommended for approval.
Okay. And is this the applicant?
This is the applicant.
Would you like to address the council?
Just here to answer any questions. My name's Michael Larson.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any questions from council? Okay.
So this was already this is already rezoned. This is just the final plat.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. I don't see any questions. I'd entertain a motion at this time.
Yeah, I'll move that we approve the final plat for the Cityside townhome subdivision.
I'd second.
Okay. That's been moved by Councilmember Page and seconded by Councilmember Barber. Any comments at this time? I see no comments. All right. We will take a vote, starting with Councilmember Barber.
Aye.
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 Okay. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. All right. Now we are looking at resolution of intent to consider a boundary line adjustment.
We've recently received a request to adjust a common municipal boundary between Kaysville City and Farmington. The property's out on the south end of town. This is 350 East Street with Shepherd Lane just above it. The red line is the current city boundary that cuts across like here. The property owners would like to build a home on the property outlined in yellow. It's currently in Farmington City. They believe it would be better served taking services and addresses and other things off Kaysville City Street rather than trying to go through the property down to the Farmington area. So they've submitted a petition to do that boundary exchange. The first step in the process is to essentially accept that petition and begin the process of reviewing it for whatever issues may exist, and then it will come back for public hearing and final vote at a later time. So because it is in Farmington already, they're going through the same process to release the property. As both cities complete that process, then it will come into Kaysville. But this is just the first step, that we have to accept the request, and that allows us to review it, see if there's issues, to start doing the proper notification and all those kind of things.
Okay, thank you. And this is the applicant. Would you like to say anything?
No.
Okay, just here for questions?
Covered.
Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful. All right. There isn't anybody signed up for public comment on this. Any questions from council? Councilmember Garn.
Just have one question. The staff report, it says that both Farmington and Kaysville will be working on this concurrently. Has any action been taken? And also they discussed, I guess, in the Planning Commission is where this idea originally came up. So I'm sure Farmington's aware moving forward. Have they taken any action, or is Kaysville the first to take action?
I'm actually here. My husband has been the one that's been working with Farmington City. When we originally did it, we thought perhaps that we would shift the entire lot into all of Kaysville, but Farmington City has requested to maintain the portion over to 950 North. There's a trail system that they would like to keep within the Farmington Trail system. And the only request, based on what my husband has told me, the one request that they did give us is that on 350 East in the Kaysville boundaries, and then also if it is annexed into, that we would be responsible for putting in a sidewalk and curb and gutter. On 950 North, it does exist, this curb and gutter. So that was their request. And as far as I know, they are not opposed to us annexing this particular portion into Kaysville. It would be easier for us, particularly for our address.
Thank you.
To be able to utilize off of 350 East.
Okay. Any other questions? No. Councilmember Hanson.
Just that, could you say again what they wanted you to build, the sidewalk or be responsible on 350 or? On
350 East, which is, I believe, is a Kaysville street. 950 North here along on the bottom, that is Farmington. And the reason why we would like access off of 350 is on the end of the lot on 950, that is actually a ravine with the creek and a culvert that goes under 950 North. So it's more logical for us to actually have that access. We would actually, if it remains entirely in Farmington, our access will be off 350 because there's no place for us to access off of 950 North.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
So you'll retain ownership of
the
lower portion that would remain in Farmington?
Yes. So we will own the property if it's annexed in both Kaysville and in Farmington. But that will pretty much stay as green space as is.
Is there an easement that tells you that it needs to stay that way, or is it just a condition of the lot itself?
That's just what they would prefer, and it's really not buildable because the stream goes along all the way towards the back, and it's mostly in the ravine. This is the portion that's buildable to put a home on.
My question is about the curb gutter and sidewalk from your lot that would be in Kaysville. Would you continue that down?
We would continue it from the edge of the corner in Kaysville at 350, right there, all the way down to the corner of 950.
That was my question.
And that's where it meets in. And there's actually a storm drain there that we would tie the gutter into.
Okay. And then my final question was just on the recommended options from staff. Recommends that the approve allowing proposal to be further examined on public notice sent regarding a public hearing. So we would, if we approve this today, then the notice would go out. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And then the public hearing would come when this comes back on
Yeah, I believe we have to notice it for 3 consecutive weeks or something like that, so the public hearing would be a month and a half away probably.
Okay. And so then it comes back to this meeting as an action item, Mayor? Is that how it works?
Let's see. Yes, because it's come before us. If it goes through Planning Commission, then it can go on action items. Isn't that what we decided?
Because it's an action item
It's
today.
been suggested. Annexations are not required to go through the Planning Commission. But.
Okay. So if we approve, I just want to make sure that we did get that public hearing, and that's
Yes.
part of the process after approving.
That's
today.
the required process, yes.
Can I ask one more question?
Of course.
Just you said something about a trail system that they want to preserve. Have you allowed access of a trail to go through there?
Farmington City will continue to have access to that. They will take that easement that goes along. You can't really see it in this aerial photograph, but it goes along on the south end into Hunter's Creek on the other side of the road. Oh, I'm sorry.
Use that red button to
Oh, yeah.
Is it on?
push that button.
This one? Oh, okay. Sorry. Right here, across here, the trail kind of comes, I believe, right here, if you can see this line, and it comes across here. It's difficult to see because there's a lot of trees along here, and it goes up, and I believe it falls in here, and right here it connects into that Rio Grande Trail.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons why they wanted to maintain that within the Farmington, I think, trail system. My husband probably could give you better information because he's the one that's met with them.
That's okay.
So they will still maintain access to that. And the ravine comes in front of that to the west. So.
Good. No, thank you.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. All right. So any more questions? Okay. If not, I would entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make a motion that we approve the boundary line adjustment on Resolution 18301.
Okay. Okay.
Just one point of
Yes.
clarification.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we're not voting to approve the boundary
sorry.
adjustment, but the resolution to go forward to consider the boundary adjustment.
Thank you.
That's correct.
Yes.
Can I modify my motion?
Say it.
To consider the boundary line adjustment.
Okay. Sounds good to me. Our lawyer has stepped out, but I think we'll call it
I
good.
think we're good. Thank you.
And you agree second? You agree with that? Yes. Okay. All right. Okay, let's vote. Oh, any more comments before I do that? No? Okay. Councilmember Adams.
Aye.
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 All right.
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right, now we're moving on to our work items. We're going to look at an ordinance creating a new process for lot consolidations and lot line adjustments. I think that's Andy.
Over the last few months, there's been some discussion about processing of subdivisions. It's been directed to the staff to review those. This first ordinance is an ordinance which generically states that in a subdivision that either consolidates 2 lots into one or just adjust a common boundary between 2 existing lots, rather than going through the whole process of subdivision in the same process that all other 100-lot subdivisions go through. This would allow these that create no new lots to be reviewed and approved strictly administratively by the staff. So the ordinance that's in the packet defines those 2 types of subdivisions and then gives the process for their approval. It's essentially the same process as any other subdivision, except the staff has authority to approve those and complete them.
Okay. All right. Comments on this?
Questions?
Question, yeah, of course. Councilmember Hanson.
So how would this?
Oh, actually, it's
Sorry.
Councilmember Hanson.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay, Councilmember Barber.
My bad. So if we approve this and we made this change, how would it come to council? It says it would continue as a work item? Or would it just go straight to an action item, or would it skip that process completely?
The way it's listed tonight is just as a work item, so you cannot take final action on it.
Okay.
If you're happy with the format, you would recommend that it move to an action item, then you'd see it again at your next meeting.
Okay.
Is that your question? I think
Yeah.
you were. I think
more asking about,
you were
like-
getting at
I'll come back.
something going through the process.
This new
correct?
process.
So,
So when would we see it?
You would not.
We would not see it.
You would
Like the
not
one
see
that we
it.
had a couple of weeks ago where they were just splitting one lot into two.
Well, if they're splitting one lot into two, you'll still see it because that creates a new lot.
Okay,
If
that was
it's
my
taking
question.
two lots into one, or two lots that just suggest a common boundary,
Oh, okay.
so that there's no new lot created,
Then we wouldn't see it.
those would be, just the staff could approve those. We just verify that they meet the zoning and the setbacks and those kind of things, and then we could approve that plat. We'd still record a subdivision plat.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you. That does answer my
Yes, Councilmember Hanson.
So explain that. Is this somebody that owns, is it a single owner or could it be between two owners?
It could be two owners.
But both parties would have
Both
to?
parties have to consent, yes.
Okay, so there has to be the consent, they both consent, then you're just asking that approval could happen. It's not creating a new lot, it's just moving that.
That's correct, yes.
Line.
So I think a great example is I had a coworker once that she bought a home and her neighbor built a fence after she'd bought the home, and the fence was fine, but when they went to sell the home, the fence actually encroached like a foot onto her property. So rather than go back through this process where you got to move the line, you just got to come to council, it made sense. Both my coworker friend and the neighbor were fine with where the fence was, and it didn't change anything really. It just kind of streamlines that process.
Okay. All right. Any further questions on that? Okay. You have a question. Go ahead.
I'm always just worried about, after all this talk about liability, but somebody, once that changes, there's no way of undoing it. If it was all properly done, I guess if it was improperly done, then somebody could complain anyways. But if you're following the proper things, okay.
We still intend to record a subdivision plat. The county will not record a plat unless all owners of record have signed that. So that's the real level of protection. We're not going to
The
just
extra
sneak
level
something
that-
through. They have
Okay.
to sign the plat before it can be recorded.
Before it can go to county, okay,
Yeah.
good. That's good
Okay.
enough for me.
All right.
Signed and notarized, actually.
That's correct. Yeah, actually
They have to have
notarized.
a notary that.
So
Okay.
it's,
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Okay. All right. So,
Someone would move it.
yes,
Right.
I'll entertain a motion to move it to an action item.
So I'll move to move this ordinance change for lot line adjustments to from a work item to an action item on the next council agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Garn and seconded by Councilmember Hanson. Any further comments? All right, Councilmember Hanson.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes 5-0. Okay, next we're going to be discussing an ordinance modifying the process for subdivision review and required subdivision improvements. Also, Andy.
this is similar. This ordinance actually does two things. The first thing that this ordinance as proposed does is give Planning Commission final authority on final plats. There's been some suggestion that final plats, well, I shouldn't say some suggestion, it is an administrative duty to approve a final plat. There's actually some movement at the state level to take final plats away from council on the state level. The idea of that is to take the politics out of something that should be more or less black and white. The way the ordinance is prepared, final plats would go to the Planning Commission for final approval and not to the City Council. However, as it's proposed currently, preliminary plats would still come through the City Council. There has been some question as to whether that's appropriate or not. That's probably the question that we'd ask you tonight, whether you want to still see preliminary plats or if you want all plat approvals to just be conducted by the Planning Commission. Still requires public hearing and the same process. It just doesn't, the final plat under this proposal wouldn't come to you. If you prefer not to see preliminary plats, we would modify this for your next review. The second thing this ordinance does, as about 2 years ago, we adopted an active transportation plan. There was no enabling language in our ordinance that allowed the city to exact elements of that plan when development occurred. So we've added a paragraph into our subdivision ordinance that gives us the authority to exact those elements of the active transportation plan. So if our plan shows that there'll be a trail through that particular property in the past, we could not require that because we didn't give ourselves that authority. We could do that now so that we can start getting those improvements installed as development occurs. So that's
Thank
the two elements of this ordinance.
Okay. Councilmember Garn, then Councilmember Barber.
Thank you. Does this ordinance change and anticipate that, at least in final plat, the way it's written currently, that the city council could be sort of a quasi or an appeal body for the planning commission decision?
Yes. That's what we anticipate. That still needs to be addressed formally.
Okay. And if we were to, say, decide also that we wanted to move preliminary plat to planning commission only, then I guess it follows that city council would be the appeal body for both?
I believe the way the code's written now, that is how it would work. Both preliminary plat and final plat, city council would be the appeal authority for. If it's not written that way, we could certainly write it that way.
Yeah, and the only reason I asked that, it seems to me there's a distinction between being an appeal body and actually having it in our ordinance that it has to come before city council, correct?
Right. Yeah, that creates the issue of if you give final plat approval, how can you be the appeal authority on your own action?
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Barber, did you have a question?
So how would how does the public hearing, when would that be held if we bypass this?
It would be held the same as it is now with the planning commission at preliminary plat.
Just with the planning commission, though? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
That's the formal required public hearing.
Okay.
You can
When
take
it's
as much
here.
public comment as you choose to.
Okay, and when it's come here, that's just because it's on
That's
our
correct.
agenda.
Okay.
So are we addressing both the preliminary plat,
Yes.
and
Both.
final plat?
Yes. And it would make council the appeal body for that. So, do you understand? So, we have had things already that have come to us, and I think we've experienced the frustration that something comes to us and we cannot deny it because it meets our ordinances, right?
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Okay. So that's why it's administrative, because as long as they're meeting.
It's really a yes or no.
Right, exactly. So, but it would set it up so that if, am I saying this right?
Yes, I think we want direction on the preliminary plat. I think the final plat, we feel like we've received direction from you. Yeah, that's fine.
Right.
Preliminary plat, are you okay with removing that also from you, which there is really no substantial difference, and you're addressing it exactly right.
There's no substantial difference between the preliminary plat.
They both have their own set of, they're both administrative actions, and they both have their own set of measures that they need to meet, and I think you could both argue that there aren't, once they've met those measures, there aren't really a decision there for you to deny it without putting the city in jeopardy.
Yeah, and I'll just insert that the power that this body has is setting the expectations in the general plan, and that's what this body would do. And if you're not happy with those ordinances, you change those ordinances. But once those ordinances are in place, they should be just upheld, right, by the Planning Commission. Correct?
Very well said. And we don't want to take rezones or things like that are the council's responsibility away. This is just an administrative action that could be.
Okay. Councilmember Hanson and then Councilmember Page.
So I don't know, is this question or comment because it's a work item?
It's work item, so you can say whatever.
I guess just one worry I have here is I don't mind being the appeal body, but who allows the appeals to come? Because I've just seen some things lately, whether you agree or disagree, that some of our ordinances were left to interpretation, and we don't agree as a council to how the Planning Commission has interpreted it. But you're right, if it's written, and I think those are still ordinances we need to address, that there's more clarity, but if we get in one of those situations, we're revoking our right to review it. Am I correct on that?
I believe so. Appeal authority.
We can't bring our own appeal. I mean, that's because what I'm saying is I want to appeal that decision. We can't do that as a body.
If you've approved the land use decision, then you can't then act. That same body can't then act as the appeal authority. So right now, City Council approves final plats in the code, in the city code. The City Council then can't act as the appeal authority. So this change would allow you to act as appeal authority.
I believe what Councilmember Hansen is saying is that if we see something going through Planning Commission and it is interpreted one way, and if I'm understanding correctly, are you saying, can we as a body insert ourselves and say that should come to us because we don't agree with how Planning Commission did it?
I believe that you can file an appeal.
Is that what you were getting
That's
at?
what I'm wondering. Again, whether we agree with these, we've just seen them recently, at least since I've been on the council, where we didn't agree. Well, maybe it's me personally not agreeing with certain interpretations. I agree with what you're saying is if we have good, clear ordinances, it's just when those ones where I think it is up to interpretation the way they're written.
That's correct.
And I think it'd be a good course to go back through those and tighten them up a little. And at that point, I feel comfortable, but it's just what do we do in those cases?
In the meantime. Okay. I wanted Councilmember Page and then Councilmember Garn.
That was part of my question as well. If we didn't agree with the Planning Commission, can we put verbiage in there to allow the council to take a look at that? I guess that's the question I have as an appeal body.
I just want to make sure you're making a distinction between an appeal of a decision that they make, and we're speaking specifically about preliminary and final plat. So if you disagree with them accepting preliminary or final plat, again, it's really hard to appeal that administrative decision. We're not talking generally about anything else beyond those two items.
Well, I guess the question I have is, first of all, I don't think that we can be an appeal body when it comes to like the way that we want to set it up now, where they do the preliminary plat, we do the preliminary plat, they do the final, and if we disagree with that we go to us as a final. I mean, that doesn't even make sense. And not only that, we've originally looked at it as the primary, as the preliminary. How in the world can we be the appellant body to that? I don't think we can be. I guess that's the question. But I'm talking about if we change the ordinance where the Planning Commission did the preliminary and the plat, and they took that out of the City Council to make those decisions. What happens if, for example, they do the preliminary plat and we just go, wow, we just don't agree with that? I mean, is there a process that we can take that forward and we can have the right to discuss that as well, or are we just basically stuck with the Planning Commission on what they approved?
I believe, and maybe Nick should weigh in here, but I believe that like Andy said, that you can be an appeal. You can appeal that decision as well.
Okay.
It doesn't have.
And who would we go to if we see something going on? Say, Larry, Councilmember Page, he's our liaison. He sees this and says, "Holy cow, this is wrong." Yeah. And would he go to Andy and say, "Well, you'd have to come to the council and say, should we appeal this?"
I think he would file an appeal just like any other citizen would file an appeal on an action.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have rules, but I think we would also have the opportunity that if he's seeing this at the Planning Commission level, we'd have weeks and weeks to discuss this before they even made their decision, so we could vet why you don't believe the preliminary plat should be accepted and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that we don't get me wrong. I actually agree with this process because I think it's important that we take out the the politics out of it when it's not even a politics matter, and I think we have to be careful. There's a lot of cities that make dumb decisions. In fact, we saw the legislature this year come very close on passing a deal where they could sit there and supersede our authority. And a lot of it is if you look at the people that voted against it, it was the developers and and contractors that are very upset with some of the decisions that cities make, and they're not in accordance with law. And I think that that's the important thing is and if we do go forward with this process, we need to make sure that the Planning Commission is not only, they need to be trained well and understand what they're doing and make correct choices. And I think that puts it right on the staff level where you guys need to make sure that they're aware of their responsibilities as well.
We definitely need to do a better job of educating you and the council or the Planning
Agreed.
Commission about what their responsibilities are and where they have a decision to make and where they don't.
Okay, Councilmember Garner.
Yeah, okay, just for sake of consistency, not that I necessarily disagree, Councilmember Page indicated that he's for the process, but from consistency standpoint, and I'm going to argue the practicality, I always seem to lose on these arguments in every venue, but practically speaking, if someone had a problem, either the developer or some other party, potentially injured party, they could ask for it to be appealed. My argument would be that we're almost, well, first let me make the consistency argument. If we feel like the council should still have a role, I'm not too concerned about reducing the workload of the council by not having these come unless we feel it's appropriate. I'm concerned about the system itself. So either we think that the council, either each council member here has the opinion that the council should still be involved in an administrative decision, or we don't. So we should leave it the way it is, but not have this sort of well, if we disagree, even though maybe technically that authority is there, but really if it's an administrative action, I think what we're saying is that the bulk of our authority ends at zoning, ends at rezoning property. Once that's done, as long as they meet code and no one objects, then the property owners, as long as they're within code, should be able to present a plat that meets code. That's an administrative decision. That's my view. So I'm doing it based on my vote to go to, and I would also say that we ought to include not only final plat, but preliminary plat as a administrative action, and we should be only the appeal body, and that's my view because it's an administrative action, but not because we're just reducing workload or something like that, just because I think that's the principled way to do it. Otherwise, based on our training and presentation this morning, I think we're overstepping our bounds a little bit. I think we're denying or making decisions on preliminary and final plat when arguably we're really overstepping our authority. So,
okay. Councilmember Adams.
Don't need to comment, but an example would be of Symphony Homes who came in, and Planning Commission said, no, we don't like necessarily the, I'm going to call it the artistic design of it. And bless the hearts of the Planning Commission who maybe have a little bit of artistic view in them. But what is Symphony, in that scenario, what would Symphony have done? I guess they can appeal to us, but then there's a level of intimidation, and I'm picking a fight with the Planning Commission. I don't want to. I mean, that happened on a sub-level, actually. But what are they to do? I think we're giving away too much power. I think preliminary still could come to this body because there's a distinction there. We're elected. The Planning Commission is not. And I think sometimes when it comes to a public outcry, people want to speak to us, not people we appoint.
That's a good example. I think you're asking me a question there. Under that scenario, rather than it just automatically coming to the City Council, Symphony would have appealed the Planning Commission's decision. It would have then been presented to you, and you would have determined if there was an error made based on interpretation of that ordinance. So
and in any event, at Planning Commission level or at the City Council level, the public clamor, it shouldn't have a place in your decision because it's an administrative role.
That's right.
When you're at a legislative decision, then you take into account public clamor, the public outcry. But at an administrative level, whether the public is for or against the project really shouldn't be a consideration that the council or the Planning Commission considers.
Good point, Councilmember Adams. I haven't asked. So, Councilmember Hanson, would you like to include both preliminary and final plat, or just final?
I guess the way it was proposed, it was just final. The action items didn't take long. I just worry about, again, the watchdog of it, and maybe that's what it's just a chance to look at it, get our eyes on it. It's harder to go to every planning commission meeting and stay up on every issue. So that's why it's nice to have the preliminary plats at least come across. So I like it with just as proposed, but making sure we have the appeal body, just a chance if somebody needs to come and we can appeal it ourselves if we feel like something's not going right. That's my thoughts.
I have a question, Mayor, or unless somebody's in line.
Sure, go ahead, Councilmember Adams.
In response to Nick, so then why did we entertain the folks? Why did we try and get a construction access? Why did that even matter? Why did this body vote to move that on? Why didn't you shut this body down and say you can't do that? They meet the code, their plat meets the code, phase one can go. Why didn't you do that then? We listened to the folks, so did we break the law there?
I don't know
what
that we
you just
broke
told
the
me.
law. I think we tabled the item, which was an appropriate way to do it, to consider that
construction
issue.
access,
And at that point,
which
the
isn't required in
developer
our
came
code.
back with an agreement with that they would agree to do that. When the developer agrees to do something, if the city council says, developer, can you create Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, and the developer says, I'd love to do that, yes, that's a great idea, and they agree to do that, then the city council can require that because they've agreed to do it. I believe what the council did was not illegal. They tabled the item to give the developer a chance to see if that agreement
But
could
if
be
it's
made.
administrative and it met the code, we shouldn't have done that, according to what you just said.
I think what he's saying, if the developer would have come back and said, there's no way I can get this done, and then you still required it or denied the plat based on that, then you'd been in trouble.
That's
But
exactly
since
right.
they volunteered that, you accepted that handout, so to speak.
Yeah, but the point that we shouldn't even listen to the people is what I'm making here. We should have just said, sorry, we can't hear you. We're not going to table this. We're not going to consider that. I think that's important that we do that, is the point, I guess, that I'm ultimately getting at here. I think it's important that the people do have a right to their voice.
I think it's important on the subdivisions that we understand what the issues are that sometimes the public can bring forward that we're not aware of. Now, if they're just saying, I like this or I don't like it, that's the clamor. But when they bring facts to us or issues that need to be addressed in the process, then it's very important to hear those.
You're getting right to the root of the concern now. And that is why I disagree with giving away preliminary. So we're taking that away from the people.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Barber, Councilmember Garn, then Councilmember Hanson.
Just as a comment, I was going to say, I think most of these questions that we're having are surrounded by the preliminary plat and the distinction between the Planning Commission, which is a recommending body, and it's interesting to me that we would be taking away the action from the recommending body. Because if they just, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I've always interpreted that they make recommendations, approve or deny. In the Symphony case, they recommended it to be denied, and then we took action. So we are no longer looking to them as a recommending body, but a voting
an action body.
And I think that's a pretty big paradigm shift from what they were appointed to do, and as well as the ability for the public interaction.
They do have
You can comment.
other actions that they take. That wouldn't be the only thing that they do that is.
That's the final action,
that's
and then
an
that's
action.
true. I should say, I realize they do take action. They do approve a lot of things that we don't formally see, but these are ones that affect the community in a much different way.
Do not bring chicken coops to us.
They can have those. They can keep the chicken coops.
Okay. Councilmember Garn, then Councilmember Hanson.
Okay, I think you already cleared that point up, but I served for about 4 years on the Planning Commission. We made quite a few decisions that don't come to the City Council that were administrative. This is all already administrative. Again, I warned my colleagues that this training at the beginning, we talked about sort of overstepping our bounds into the administrative action area. You're really not giving up anything by including both preliminary and final in this, because as already been stated, if there was some big concern that the council which seems odd to me, okay, none of the affected parties that could attend a public hearing would have any objection towards that action going forward. So they would not appeal it to the city council, but the city council, knowing better than the private property owners and the neighbors, could decide that, well, we don't agree with any of them. We are going to appeal this to ourselves, but still apparently we have that authority. But if anyone has any problem with the decision the Planning Commission made, they have full ability to say, I'd like this to go up to the council for a decision. So I really don't know what you're losing by making this what it really is, an administrative decision. In fact, the Planning Commission has even looked at some things, for example, recently, well, you just mentioned it, the chicken coops, that maybe even they don't need to look at. But there's always an avenue for any citizen to come to their council and say, I've got a problem with this. That's where ordinances get changed, which is what we do. We legislate. We don't do administration.
I'd just like to insert at this point, let's just keep in mind that we could do part of this now, and if everybody feels comfortable doing just final plats at this point, then we could allow some time to pass and get our planning commission fully trained, and then once we feel comfortable that we could revisit it later. So it's not all or nothing. We could do it in steps and stages. So just because it doesn't all happen tonight doesn't mean eventually we won't go that direction. But I want to go to Councilmember Hanson, and then Councilmember Adams, did you have something to follow up on after that? Okay, so Councilmember Hanson.
You skipped me, by the way.
Did I?
Yeah, but that's fine.
Why don't you go here first? I think he was next.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, just let me, I hate meeting with a bunch of lawyers, so it wasn't very fun. But they were talking about this very issue. And they had the head land acquisition man for Ivory Homes. And they were talking about this very issue. And one of the issues that they had is they went to the Planning Commission, and they had an issue where a person went in to put a subdivision. It met all the covenants. It was in compliance with all the zoning. And because of public clamor, it was turned down. Well, and the council, they had some changes they wanted to make on it and everything, which I don't think was even right. But the guy was willing to do it, and they turned him down again. The guy was completely frustrated. He called Ivory and asked him if he'd buy the land. We can't get it through the city. So Ivory said, well, we'll do it. And he says, well, here's all of our engineering. I mean, they won't approve it, but this is what we had. They looked at it and they said, that's exactly what Ivory would do. So they turned around and they went back. And, the guy, they're decent enough. And he says, well, we're going to pay you for your engineering. After they bought that land, now you got to understand, this is 2 weeks. This is 2 weeks when the next Planning Commission meeting came up. They turned around, unanimously approved Ivory's request, exact same zoning, exact same engineering, exact everything that they just turned down to this guy. What we don't want this to happen. And I guess that comes in, when it all come down to it, and even the guy from Ivory said that guy got ripped off. And it was wrong. And it all was from public clamor. They liked the Ivory because they've done business with them, and they liked them, and so the people were comfortable with them. But in reality, it was the same thing. And so I guess that's the thing. I really agree with Jake and what he's saying, that this is administrative. It needs to be done, but we need to have our Planning Commission understand the law and make sure they understand what they're doing. And I think that that's the way it should be done. I think we need to be extremely careful, because that guy in the first place, when he went there, all he needed to do was file a lawsuit and he would have had it. And I mean, we don't want to go that route. We want to be fair to everyone that comes in, and everyone has an equal chance. And that's the opinion.
All right, I'm going to insert at this point, it's 8:45, and we have some substantive discussion to still have. So I want Councilmember Hanson, Councilmember Adams, then let's make a motion on this, all right? So.
Mine was just a comment. I think, it's a mix of things, but when we asked for the access road, Councilmember Adams, you brought this up, I think there was just some again, in my mind, when I read the code just about safety of access, that's why I said it would be nice. So it was sticking within the code, but that, people just brought that to your attention. So I'm kind of in between. Like, I agree, we want to listen to people, but if we have bad, we just need to work on our ordinances, tighten them up for those things. Again, because I thought, to me, there was some vaguity, so I don't think we broke any laws. Because, again, I thought there was, for safe access, I thought we had a problem there, and that's why, when we tabled it, that's why it was so strong in the request. It would be nice to have that. So, but that's where we need to tighten up ordinances in the future.
Okay. Councilmember Adams.
I'm just confused about the warning, issued by Councilmember Garn and the verbiage of "we don't do that." We don't do. We do that, and until this decision, if this decision is made, preliminary and final are taken away, then yes, from this day forth, we don't do that. But we do that right now. That is on the table. So we are commingling into the administrative and have been. And I just think it's a whole big pendulum shift all at once that completely remove, it's an added step for people, it's an added level of intimidation for people. And if they know they're going to planning and then they're going here, it's a big shift.
So you would feel comfortable with having final plat be taken care of at the administrative level, though, correct?
Right, because at preliminary, we would be able to hear, like Andy was saying, he took the words out of my mouth, if there's a blind spot we have not caught. Okay. And that happens. And that could be caught. We can hear other things. I think at preliminary, there's a filter there that we can apply. Because if we cut something off at preliminary, it can't go to final.
Sure. Okay, so what I'm hearing is I feel like we can either have this come back as a study session item again, or we could move forward. What I'm hearing is not a whole lot of comfort with doing both, but most people agreeing that final plat could be administrative. So what would you like to do? Would you like to continue to talk about this, or would you like to move forward and have just the one step taken care of? Councilmember Barton.
Brief comment.
Okay.
And I'm fine. This is certainly not a hill to die on. I mean, we can go part way. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. Having said that, I just have to tell you, I'm trying to think back. I mean, I know we had this one issue that came up recently with Symphony Homes, and I didn't particularly like the plat. But it probably met ordinance and everything. Certainly staff felt it did. But I'm looking at the whole 6 years that I've been serving. I can't count on one hand the number of times that preliminary or final plat has been anything but administrative. They haven't really become political issues. And again, to the point, in this, if you look at it pragmatically, not theoretically, in this case, what would have happened with Symphony Homes, the one place where the preliminary plat was an issue, is it would have come to the council anyway, because it would have been appealed by Symphony Homes. And we would have had that exact same discussion of access road, public comment. The exact same result would have resulted even with this new process in place. So that's my final point.
All right. I would entertain a motion at this time.
So with that, I will move to, one question. So could if I make a motion to make this change, could that be moved to action? Yeah, I could. So I guess answer my own question. So I'll just make a motion to include preliminary plat and move this to the action item agenda for the next council meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Garn and seconded by Councilmember Page. Councilmember Page. Final comments? Any comments?
I have one final comment.
Okay, go ahead.
I think the interpretation part of it, I think in your case with the Symphony Homes, I think we're just putting a lot of expectation and pressure on the applicant to file that formal appeal, because that brings on a whole different view of the situation at that point. I think it might be something to take into consideration.
Okay. Councilmember Hanson?
Just a clarification on the motion. Was the motion...
It's just for final plat.
No, both.
No, he wants both.
You want both? Okay,
He
to
wants
include.
the
I'm
whole
sorry,
thing.
I misunderstood. So,
Good
both.
clarification.
All right, so that is the motion.
He's modifying the agenda item with adding that in.
Okay.
I'll
That's
make a
correct.
substitute motion
Okay. What is your substitute motion?
that we move it forward and leave preliminary out.
Okay, do we have a second to that?
I'll second that.
Okay. All right, first we're going to vote on this. So, any comments? Am I doing this right? No comments. All right, let's start with the vote. Councilmember Page, the substitute motion.
Nay.
Councilmember Garn.
Nay.
Aye.
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 Okay. The substitute motion passes, and we will see that as an action agenda item next time. All right. Motion passes 3-2. Okay, thank you. And may I just say, well played, everyone. Okay. Good discussion. All right, now we will have our road fee discussion, general fund overview. Shane.
Did you have anything you wanted to say there? Okay. He was looking up how you did the substitute, and I think you did it just right, but he's going to verify.
I would be willing to take coaching on that.
Yeah, I didn't want it to go past and not remind us if we had something to fix there, but I think you did it right on. So that means you probably did it wrong, because I think you did it right. Thank you for the opportunity to just, I've got 7 or 8 slides here I want to buzz through, and just wanted to open this up. The main purpose of this is to clear up any misconceptions, to talk about maybe a little bit of the history of the general fund, and mainly it's just to demonstrate what we do as we look for ways to fund roads, what we've done, I guess, in the past especially. Obviously, we have a budget retreat coming up in April where we will talk about next year's budget, so this is more of a focus on where we've been and what got us here. So as a background, obviously funding for roads comes from Class C funds. Class C funds are restricted funds, but they are part of the general fund. So you can't spend Class C funds in any other regard besides on road maintenance projects. I think there is a misconception that road maintenance is paid for from other general fund revenue sources, like property taxes. It can be, and it has. How I usually see this is that if there are additional needs, that those are maybe allocated on a year-to-year basis. There are some cities that do it that way, but it usually seems to vary in what they can do from a general fund perspective. You'll notice the 2015 legislature passed HB 362, which is the Proposition 1 that we're all kind of familiar with, that provided an extra $250,000 to $300,000 for Kaysville specifically. So we went from about $800,000 in Class C funds to, well, $900,000 to about $1.2 million. So, and then the 2018 legislature, you'll probably have many of you followed their actions. There's a lot of transportation bills, but I think specifically those 3 I mentioned there, 120, 136, and the House Joint Resolution 20, which was the one that would allow the citizens to vote on the 10 cents gas tax, which is mostly done to fund education, but would also have a positive influence on us as far as road goes. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to stop me, and of course Mr. Story's here to answer the hard questions that I can't answer. Most of my presentation is just a couple of different graphs. I think this one's interesting. This is just, it's hard to read, I'm sorry. The brown is property tax, and the blue is sales tax. So I have a couple of people have sent me graphs of the other people have put together showing our revenue that went kind of like this, and I'm not sure where that's coming from. This kind of really shows you how this works as far as a general fund budget goes. Our property taxes stay about the same. We maybe do capture a little bit of new growth here. And then we raise property taxes, which is what we did here. So if our budget was $12 million before we raised taxes, property taxes, We raised them 100% or 97% or whatever that number was. That doesn't mean that we go from $12 million to $14 million, because there's obviously a lot of different revenue there in the general fund. We went from 1.5 about to about $3 million in property tax revenue. The blue line is our sales tax, and that's probably one that's a little bit more volatile. It's a little bit harder to count on. Obviously, in the recession times, this went down significantly. We've had some good years over the past. This is trending in a good way. To me, this is hard to count on, and to say it's always going to be, what's that number, 4.5 million. That would be great, and I'm hoping for that. But I think there's a general trend in Utah to see sales tax maybe slightly decreasing. I think a lot of it's attributed to internet sales, Amazon type, maybe not Amazon specifically because we're capturing them, but other internet purchases, and maybe some of our brick and mortar are struggling a little bit with that. But anyway, that's just a general trend. But this is a good number for us, and I think this is really one of the key components that has seen our fund balance do so well over the past few years. This increase here, not a dollar. Well, this was done for basically three reasons. About 30% of that was to make up for Proposition 5. So Proposition 5 said that we don't transfer money from power company to the general fund. So we raised about 30% of that was for that, to make up for that transfer that we no longer did, and then about 70% of it went to fire and police. I think we hired some new folks, and then we obviously funded the new police station. So none of that money, I say that because none of that money went to roads, is my main point there. Any questions about that slide? I just thought this one was also interesting. It just shows the relationship that our general fund tends to have, which is this line here, with property tax, which is this line here. I'm sorry, this is property and sales tax. So you look at the revenue that we generate in the general fund, it's really quite fixed. There's not a lot of different things we can do, and we can raise certain fees. Usually that makes a little bit of a difference. So really where we have a lot of say is obviously in property taxes and somewhat in sales taxes as well. But I think you can see a definite correlation here between those two. As goes property and sales tax, so goes the general fund. I believe that's the case. This was taken just right off our website. This shows where Kaysville is in regards to other Davis County cities as far as property tax goes. We are here fourth from the bottom. We have another city here that's the second from the bottom that still does a significant transfer from their power company to their general fund, which I don't know if you call that a false subsidy or what. I've heard referred to a few things, but that's I think it's just something of note that Kaysville has done that in the past. I look at these cities and I see Kaysville with some of the highest property tax values, and just from a livability perspective, it doesn't get any better than our city. And I would expect from a city that's to me as fantastic as our city that we might be more up in this area when it comes to property taxes. So when I hear we need to get our spending in order, and we have a spending problem, or what are we doing with all this money? I look when I talk to somebody and I can talk about the facts here. I ask them about that and where we're collecting too much money. I don't really see that. So I think that's something to keep in mind. We have a pretty tight budget and we run a pretty lean staff, and I think that's we have this ever demand for services, yet a demand for low taxes too, and those things are not always in harmony. This slide just shows a couple of different pieces of the pie that make up the general fund. I think the main thing to keep in mind here is, I'm sorry this is so small, I hope you can see it better on your tablet, but Personnel costs make up about 58% of the budget, and then the 11% is what our Class C is. So 70% of our budget is either personnel or Class C, which we obviously wouldn't want to cut Class C for roads. That's not how that would work. So if we talk about cutting across the board 10 or 20% or whatever, I think that those generalities are hard for us as staff to go, well, what do you want to do? If you want to cut personnel to fund something else, that's a discussion I think we can have. If you decide that roads are more important than I don't want to say people, that makes it sound like you're heartless, but there are circumstances where the roads might be more important than personnel, and I think that's definitely a discussion that would be worth having. But when we say 10% of our cuts, I just wanted you to know how much of our budget is in personnel. And again, I think we run a really tight and lean ship, but others might disagree with me there. We have this big chunk of what's called other, which is these fixed costs that we have. We have to pay for elections, we have to pay for licensing, we have to pay for insurance. There's just things that don't have a lot of volatility or decision in them. And then we have another 10% here that's more or less our equipment and supplies. So you could probably find some room in here to cut some things. Salt, for example. If you have a good salt year, you may not spend as much as you planned on. But if you wanted to cut all 10%, we wouldn't buy any equipment, we wouldn't buy any salt, and that's just not a way to run a city. We've got to have some equipment, some supplies to be able to do what we need to do every day. This one is similar, just with some percentages of just the departments. So the departments that make up the general fund, these are the competing dollars for roads. You can see roads is right there at 11%, and a lot of that's public safety, Parks and Rec, who also take care of the cemeteries and the facilities, IT, and then administration.
Shane, on that one. Yeah. Okay to jump in.
Speak in the mic.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Just on that slide, just different from the last one. This is actually where the funds are going to.
Yeah. So on the first one, I tried to do things that we're purchasing regardless of departments. So
right, okay, and
supplies, this is more just department specific.
That's just making, okay,
that's
clarifying.
Exactly right.
Thanks.
Thank you for the clarification. And I'm getting down here to the end. This is kind of showing our unrestricted fund balance over the past 10 years. So where we're at 12%. So this is in reference to the general fund. So I hope this wasn't confusing in that we have 23% here and 22% right there. Does that make sense that this is 22% of the budget from 2012 and this is 23% of the budget from 2017? But the dollars are here. I hope that makes sense.
Where was that first number you talked about, the 22%?
22% is right there in that middle. So
Okay.
so in 2012 we had 22% of our budget as fund balance reserve.
Because our budget has gone up.
That's right.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good.
Historically relevant.
Yes.
Of revenue, 20% of revenue.
20% of revenue. That's right. Yeah. So we are at 23%. 25%, as you know, is the maximum that we should have. So we are in a very healthy perspective.
What was
right
the
now.
maximum? I'm sorry. Can you
25.
25. Thank you.
Yeah. So we're not supposed to carry over more than 25% of our budget year
And
to
can you
year.
repeat what the minimum is while we're here?
5.
5. Okay.
Right. So I think this shows us we're in a good spot. If we spent $1 million just off the top, just cut it down, we would be right here about to where 17%. So it'd almost be like flat there. So still, I think you could still argue healthy, but that's probably something that a different person would say different things. I give a lot of credit to our staff to having conservative spending. We've had several instances in the last 2 years where staff have come back and said, I don't need this. We budgeted for this. We don't need it, or this came under budget. And I want you to, one thing that I think that cities often are accused of is this spend it or you lose it mentality. And I just want to assure you that we do not have that here. And that's nothing to do with me. That's just wonderful people that have been that know that we have tight budgets and that are working together. Chief Olbrich knows that if he doesn't spend $1, that's $1 that can go towards Chief Erickson or Cole or Josh. So I think that we have a really good, congruent, working together relationship among our department heads, and I think that shows in this. And we've had some good sales tax numbers too. To me, those are the two. Obviously, there's a lot of other factors there, but I think those two go along there. So one maybe final comment here on fund balance. I think as we look to this as a one-year solution to roads, I think that the staff is going to propose that we throw money in here. But I think at the same time, this we're not committing to what we would do in 2020. This would be a 2019 fix, not a 2020 fix. The House passed a homeless bill, as you probably saw, and one of the funding components of that is $50,000, about $50,000 to Kaysville, but it's a percentage of sales tax that will come off of our sales tax revenue. So I've just got done telling you how we've had some good sales tax revenue years, but $50,000 next year is going to come right out. They're not even going to send it to us. They're going to take it out of our allotment. So those kinds of things we just can't predict. We just don't know what's going to happen in the future. So we just need to be careful with planning on year after year revenue. And I think that's really what makes the road fee exciting, is because it is money that we can count on. And so when you ask Mr. Belknap to plan, he can count on money. He doesn't have to say, well, I might get $3 million or I might get $1 million. And those are vastly different scenarios that he'd have to do a lot of changes on. So final slide here just kind of reemphasizes that. I think in 18 we tried to do as much as we could, and we came up with about 1.6. Next year, this is going to be the staff's recommendation, is that we, with Class C, which is about 1.2, maybe a little bit more, the road fee we think would generate about 1.1, and one-time fund balance appropriation of 1.2, we think we can put about 3.5 into next year's budget, and that's a significant amount of money. That's 3 times what we've been spending in most years. And then after that, if we, with the road fee and just the Class C funding, without being able to do anything from the general fund, we'd have about 2.5 of ongoing funds that we can spend year after year, that we can plan for and prepare for, and try to allocate. And to me, this makes the road fee so important. This is us looking at the general fund and saying, we've squeezed all the blood out of this turnip we can. We can raise property taxes, and we can do that for roads, and some have done a hybrid model of doing a road fee and raising taxes, and you can commit to putting that property tax money into roads, and that's one way to do it. But I think this road fee, treating it as an enterprise fund, that's another way that some people have suggested we fund roads, is through other enterprise funds, through water, power, sewer. And I think our citizens have said all that they want to say about that with Proposition 5. You want to use power funds to buy property, or you want to use power funds for other things, we're going to restrict your ability to even be able to do that through a proposition. And maybe roads is more important than buying property, but it's hard to gauge that from a community and go ask every individual person, are you okay with us spending it now? You weren't on road, you weren't on buying property, are you okay with it on roads? So that would probably be on a case-by-case basis. They might say yes, but I think that's a dangerous thing to do, is to have a fee where you use it for something that's not appropriate for a different department. So anyway, sorry, I think that's all I wanted to say, and of course we'd open up to questions to myself or to Dean.
Okay, all right. So, any questions on the presentation? Anything? Okay. Councilmember Adams.
I don't know.
I had a good visit with Dean about this. Really good visit, really productive visit. I was pleased with it. Because I think there are some monies there. And one of the things that came out of our meeting was that if some fund surplus transfers, happened. And I think this is great. This is a great step in the right direction. I think it shows the people that, hey, it's almost like a match program a little bit. But if fund transfers were to be, something that we could not necessarily completely concretely rely on, but something that we could review, once a year, and that came out of my meeting with Dean. I felt that was productive, that, you know, we know it does seem comfortably that we could do it now. There's a few other things. I've voiced them before, that we've got some loans falling off, and there's some differences of opinions there. But there are some avenues. There's $1.3 million in the road impact fee fund right now. That's pretty close to it, right, Dean, without getting the book out, you know, which is restricted, but, you know, that could be coupled in. You know, if Josh has a project that qualifies for impact fees, there's another $1.3 million. I think we can really get a huge jump in the next 2 years. But the thought that came out of that was that, you know, we could revisit this every year. I hope this mindset sticks. I hope that, you know, in a year from now, whatever date that is, in the budget review or whatever, or in March from now, we look at it again, we say, okay, the taxes did this. You know what? The trend is still coming up. We had the fire truck loan. We had the Flint Street Smiths payment. We had, you know, there's $500,000 or $600,000 in payments going away. And so that's, and Dean and I discussed, he taught me that's not revenue, and I just look at that as it's releasing, it's no longer going to be a burden on the general fund, though. So it does create some flexibility in that fund. It creates a little growth, the way I look at it. James' expertise could probably really help straighten me out, too, but I do look at it as it takes burden away. So I think it'd be great if we can continue to look at that. You know, since taxes went up, we definitely have, we have about 2.5. We have over 2.5 million that the surplus has gone up, roughly. And, of course, sales tax have gone up. So if that trend continues, there's potentially a little bit of alleviation that we have already. We can't predict the future, to try and keep the road fee in a very balanced manner. So I think there's a lot of good productive thought there. You know, I think there are some avenues there. And Dean expressed to me the actual two departments that I learned that did give back. The police gave back $100,000, and fire gave back $265,000 to the general fund. So kudos to those guys, you know. And, yeah, I think there's some really productive things that we can do. I think, and I think it will really create a lot of energy amongst the people when they see us putting our foot forward too, and not just saying, "Hey, give us more money," so that we in turn, you know, I don't know how to word this, but if we take more money for roads, which are relatively a relative easy sell to the people, not an easy one. I mean, I know a lot of people don't like it. But it's easier than, say, take more money to build a new city hall or something. I think if we're showing the people, we're putting your crucial funds, we're actually going to start using your accrued property taxes for your infrastructure, your daily needs. I think that gets a lot of credibility with a lot of people. So it's a good direction.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay. Great. Yes, go ahead. Councilmember Barber.
Shane, on the final slide that you went through, next year for 2019, so we'll have the $1.2 million from Class C, road fee 1.1. That's with the proposal just as we looked at it last council meeting.
Right.
Was the 1.1. So that's still
up in the
just
air.
estimating to look at that 1.1. And then the one-time fund balance appropriation of 1.2. So that puts us at the 3.5. I'm confused on the 2.5 that could be ongoing for future years. Is that because that exceeds what we need in 2019 or that we're able to use?
The 2.5 is just the Class C funding that we will get, plus the road fee.
So that'd be 2.3.
Oh, yeah.
You just saved us $200,000.
I don't think I was thinking this, but I did have the thought that earlier today that if this 10-cent.
Oh, okay.
I think that was a little bit less than 200,000.
Is that the SB like 131 or whatever?
And I guess I also was. And again, not for sure that we can do this, but you know, whether we put in 1.2 this year, maybe you can. And I don't want to say this out loud, but can you count on $200,000 a year just in general fund contribution to the
200?
Like I'm saying 1.2 here. maybe we can do this year, and that's a good number. And next year we look at it and we go, you know what, we can't put nearly that much in there because we used our fund balance and it's not back to where it was. It's still healthy, but it's still something we need to save. So can we just put in 200,000? So I think we can safely get to this number is what I'm trying to say, with a few different things.
Shane, maybe just a comment there. It looks like the local active transportation piece of that is running pretty strong, and I think will continue to run strong. So I think that the number of 2.5, I think we're all comfortable with that number.
And I think it's not a worst case scenario, but I think we can maybe even do better than that. Just like Councilman Adams said, looking at this every year, I just don't want to make a decision today where we say now we're doing 3.5 no matter what. But looking at it every year, we probably can do better than that. And that's getting us close to this $3 million mark, and that's getting me excited because that's really where we're supposed to be, and I think we can really see some progress from those kinds of numbers.
So is that 2.5, this ongoing fund, is that what is just retained in the fund that we don't really tap into, we tap into the additional money that's coming into and keep that base?
That's right.
So there'll always be $2.5 million in our road fee fund that we're adding more to. Do we need that much money?
As I understand, that's the ongoing revenue that will be spent from year to year.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So we'll be spending $2.5 million each year. I think we need to reword that.
Okay.
This last part.
So, and keep in mind, what we would be doing is we'd be setting up if the road fee passes, we'll be setting up an enterprise fund, just like your power, water, sewer, and then what we would do is we would take the Class C money and transfer it into that fund.
Okay.
So you could see all the things that happen to be revenue and expenses in both of those funds, and then we would also transfer this money in from the general fund.
The general fund would come in here. Okay.
And so next year it would be. If these two numbers didn't add up to 2.5 and we had some despair, we could get to that number or maybe even beyond that number. That would just be a transfer from the general fund to that road fund.
Where did the 2.5 number come from?
It's just a number, just basically that number, and where I think we can safely say we can, just for planning purposes. Just round it up. Yeah. So you're adding this and getting 2.3. Yeah. I'm just saying we can do 2.5. I feel safe. I feel confident that through the other things, that $200,000 can stay there. And
this year we're getting much more than that $200,000
right.
because it's a one-time bump.
Because of this,
we're putting in. Okay.
Yeah, there are three components to that. There's the C road revenue.
Yes. Speak into your mic. Thank you.
The C road revenue, the local active transportation revenue, and then the transportation utility fee revenue.
They're all playing into the 1.2.
Yeah. When I
2.5.
Okay, the 2.5.
When I said Class C, he's talking the local active transportation and the Class C money is both in this number.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to
yeah, I think that it put us
from
1 million to about 1.2, right, when we added them together. You're right. Yeah, those numbers were just boggling my mind.
And if that 10-cent gas tax passes, that's another something, probably more than $100,000 that would come to us. Done all the math there, so the legislature's looking at this through all these. They're almost helping us as much as they're hurting us in this regard. So they know that this is a problem statewide.
They're trying to fix it.
Adding money from the gas tax for education doesn't make much sense to me, because it makes it harder for them to raise gas tax in the future for road projects that are still going to be needed. This 10 cents isn't going to help us that much, but it tells me also that they might be looking for other funding sources.
Okay, Councilmember Garn.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. We have to consider that a lot of these decisions, including the decisions we make, and particularly the legislature, where we have many more members, are politically based. So if you look at it, it can drive an accountant crazy. When you're looking at some of the decisions, for example, sort of the lack of consistency, and it's not any one individual, but for example, Senate Bill 120 actually said that cities, it sort of acknowledged it was a good bill overall, if you're looking at the strategy of cities, because it acknowledged the city's right to do some kind of a user fee to pay for roads. But at the same time, it said you can't charge counties, because that's a double taxation. You can't charge counties for roads. But then they turn around on the housing issue, the homeless shelters that are not in every city in Utah, and said, we don't want to pay for this because we don't want to put that in the state budget. or have the cities that actually have the homeless shelters have that. So we're going to charge the cities. Well, isn't that the same double taxation that they just said they didn't want to do? So it can drive you crazy if you look for consistent principles, but a lot of those decisions are politically made. You've got counties in there on SB 120 saying cities can't charge us, and legislators listen to that. And so I'm sorry to make that, to bring it back in, so you get these flows in and out from the state, and you get other unexpected expenses that we've had before. For example, on health insurance, that was something that that no one could prevent. It's just the way rate making works based on your utilization, and insurance companies make those decisions. But all of a sudden, you've got a big fee there. So it's really important, and I do support this because I think there's adequate surplus to one time this year to do this kind of an investment. But we can't necessarily count on that 1 year. I do agree with Councilmember Adams that each year you can reevaluate. I think normally I would be reluctant to give direction to spend general fund money without going through the budget process, because that's normally how we do it. However, if we were to wait to go through the budget process to decide priorities, maybe I think we pretty much have all expressed that we know this is a priority, so this one time to get the construction going in the summer makes sense. But normally in the future, it would be nice to align decisions made with surplus balances if they continue to grow and we don't enter another recession. Certainly, heaven forbid, it would be like 2007, 8, 9, that period, but we're due for another recession eventually. Cycles prove that historically, and we have to be prepared for that as well. But as long as we reevaluate and we have the funds to do it, I think that should normally go through the budget process where we can decide our priorities.
Okay, thank you. I really would like to, are we good with this presentation?
Just a question on the slide.
Yes.
But go ahead.
I was just going to say, I would love to hear the presentation on from Josh, but not until you've asked your question.
Okay. Question and just one more bullet, I guess. The bullet would be that, like in the water fund, Dean and I discussed, there's about $3.3 million in the water fund. And there are ways to, do notices and say, okay, it's not needed here, but it's needed here. So I just want to keep an open mind with all of us about what really is there in the budget, and that we do have not complete authority like that. We'd have to do a mailer to the people, right? A notice of transfer. So we don't have total authority over that, but we could put that in motion. The other question on the slide, so in fiscal year 2018, we did come up with an additional $400,000, which I think is great. So if we move down to fiscal year 19, so in essence, there's about $400,000 that we came up with there, and we're talking about giving $1.2 million in fiscal year 19. So that's really just an increase of about $800,000, right? So we're really going to add, because we're already burdened with, not burdened, but we've already allocated an additional $400,000 above these numbers down here. So in all reality, it looks to me like the one-time transfer over is really just an $800,000 transfer, to be completely transparent.
Just a point of clarification.
$800,000 in additional going.
The $400,000 was carryover C road balance. That's how we got to the 1.6.
So it wasn't pulled from other areas. It was just rollover.
It was C road money that was restricted from prior years.
So it was restricted for different reasons?
No, restricted
for roads
from prior years for roads.
So it's not like the council really changed any money that was going to be allocated other places?
No, it had to be used for roads, but it was money that was not spent in previous years for roads.
From the C Road Fund?
Right.
Okay, so that's interesting. So
that's
kind of
it's a little indifferent with an email.
It's good to know. It's really good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, because my understanding was that $400,000 came from other departments, and that's the communication we had this last week. So if it's just rollover,
And Shane, to your point, and you mentioned that the police and fire had given back money, and that went into our fund surplus, right?
Right.
Okay, so the money that departments gave back, that's in our fund surplus. That's why it's so high right now, is because money was given back. So, which means it's now available, right? So, it is still there.
Yeah, you're not talking about that 1.6. That's all just C.
Right.
We're saying.
Correct.
I think going forward, there's a lot we can do, and at least in the next couple years, probably, to fund a lot of things for Josh over there that he wants to accomplish. And I would put a small plug in that I hope some of that is reconstructs too. I hope not all of this effort. It's just maintenance is important. I believe in that, but I hope some of it's reconstructs. You know, we've got the West Kaysville Belt Route that people are just dying over. So.
Well, that is a great segue, actually, because if everybody's ready to hear the man, the myth, the legend, Josh Belknap.
While Josh is coming up, can I say one thing? I think this was a fantastic discussion and presentation. Mm-hmm. Thank you. This answered so many questions that I've had that have come at me. I think others that have weighed into it, thank you. And I think it's great that the city can show that what seems to be, unless I corrected, an unprecedented in recent years allocation of other money to throw at this road situation. So thank you. I thought this was really beneficial.
Thank you.
Well, while they're looking, hopefully in budget session we can take a deeper look too.
Absolutely.
You know, I think I'd love to bounce a lot of things off the accounting professor over there.
Remember, my specialization's auditing now.
Uh-oh. All right, Josh.
All right, Mayor and Council, thank you for the opportunity to come here tonight. You want to go ahead and go to that first slide there. So there's been a lot of There's been a lot of talk the last few months about roads. We're here tonight talking about roads, and we'll probably continue to talk about roads down the road.
As it were.
Noted.
There we go. That's a good thing because this is an ongoing need. I don't think it's anything that any of us want to, let's address it one time and then, we'll move on to the next need. I think that's something that may have caused some of the situation that we find ourselves in, not unique to Kaysville at all. We've talked a lot about LTAP, the opportunity that we had I think a couple months prior to me getting here to have these individuals come in and conduct the survey of roads in Kaysville City. We appreciate that. I was talking with some industry professionals at a conference a few weeks ago, and people talking about what does it cost to bring LTAP in versus what are the rewards of that, and extremely beneficial. I think it's led to a great discussion, a dialogue happening in Kaysville. So some of the bullet points on LTAP, this is the very simple, 4 lines out of 300 some odd pages. We've currently got somewhere around 168 miles of roads. The result of the LTAP study was an average RSL of about 9.9.
And remind people what RSL is.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the remaining service life. As they looked at each road in Kaysville, they take into consideration what type of fatigue is this road experiencing, where is it in its service life. Is this a good road? Is this a bad road? What do we need to do? Preventative maintenance, but also you get to the point where you can't resuscitate something. You've got to do reconstruct. So LTAP pointed out costs, also not unique to Kaysville. Funding, there's some fluctuation in funding, but one thing you can count on is costs generally on the rise. And then it's up to cities to do something about it. We've had great dialogue with state officials. I had a chance a few weeks ago to talk to a state senator at a conference and really appreciated what they're trying to do, thinking outside the box and approaching the issue to try and tackle it. But it starts with cities on the ground, and things can get better, things can get worse. those are the options. You can kind of maintain the status quo, and you can make the argument that doing the same thing allows things to continue to degrade. So there's been a lot of discussion about a potential road fee. These are some cities where there's discussion, or some have actually enacted some sort of funding process. A few that I couldn't find solid information on, but just to make people aware that the discussion is not just in Kaysville, it's happening elsewhere.
All of those have enacted a road fee except for Pleasant Grove. And South Ogden has, and so is Spanish Fork that aren't on there.
Okay, excellent. So I think worth mentioning is, we are where we are. LTAP did a great job of illustrating that. But how did we get here? We are in a situation where we do have some problems. Massive growth over the last 15 years. West Kaysville, when I was a kid, the very first ward I was in, Mayor Johnson, the bishop of that ward, was all of West Kaysville. Anything west of the freeway was one ward, and that's now 3 stakes. So I don't want to get into that jargon too much, sorry. But just to kind of explain, a lot of infrastructure going in the city, 5 new schools, at least 7 new churches, several dozen new businesses, close to 10,000 new residents since 2002. In addition to that, with infrastructure, is about 33 miles of new road. Staffing and funding for roads haven't been able to keep pace with demand as infrastructure grows. Obviously, there's changes in what's coming in property tax, but I'm of the frame of mind that property tax, at least right now, isn't keeping pace with the additional demand that growth is placing on the city. And then a paradigm shift. I think we'll be the first to admit we've got to be better about what we're doing. We've got to be smarter about what we're doing. There needs to be a change in how we approach it, materials that we use, processes, etc., planning. So yeah, I think that's a very simplistic way to show this is how we got here, and I'm sure there's other things that can be discussed. So going forward, that's the big focus for me. Is not that I don't care about what happened in the past, but going forward is the big focus. We have the inventory from LTAP that has helped kind of guide this discussion, and we want to keep that current. We don't want to just, hey, thanks for this information and let it fall off, just like the discussion about roads. Keep it current. Like I've mentioned, better material, better methods, better planning, etc. Planning for targets of opportunity. This summer we're replacing water lines on Market and Borough. And as we go in and do that, we want water to share some of the burden to then come in after that's done and repave that road. If you're going to go in and make a mess, it doesn't make sense. Would Market maybe be a couple of years down the road? Potentially you can make that argument, but for here and now, opportunity costs, go after it. And then pavement management plans. What are we dictating our kind of general plan for taking a road from its infancy stages and seeing it through its service life? How do we plan on protecting that asset? There's money going into that. Those are precious funds. We want to respect that, and we want to milk everything that we can out of that. I think it's raining outside. Yes. So this is just projected road funding versus expenditures based on top is current funding of just C Road and that local active transportation, the 250, and trying to break that up in a 10-year period of, these are some of the percentages that LTAP recommended in that 10-year phase of, you've got your reconstruct, rehab, preventative maintenance, and miscellaneous type work. And then the bottom table is potential funding using some of the numbers that Shane had discussed. If there's road fee revenue coming in, if there's a general fund transfer, which I appreciate the point from Councilman Adams. looking at that on a yearly basis is extremely wise. And last year, my first budget go around with the city, it was a learning process, but it was also very neat to be able to sit down at a table with all the department heads and discuss needs and make changes as necessary. And I think it's a great venue with good people to talk about these are real needs, and is there a way that we can be working things to find additional funding for important things such as roads. So yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, that's it. So yeah, there's a lot of work that we want to do. LTAP had made recommendations of these are dollar figures that we feel you guys should be shooting for. We realize that that's tough to do. I'm a resident of Kaysville. I don't love the idea of giving an extra bit of my income to something that I hadn't already planned on. But there's also a need. I have an impact on the road in front of my house, roads throughout towns, and I'm happy to contribute in that effort to try and improve. Well, I won't go on to that one. We'll stick with roads here. So yeah, the funds that could additionally come in, whether it's LTAP recommends this or we end up with something smaller than that, everything makes a difference. The big thing for me that I talk a lot about is economy of scale. A contractor that's doing $900,000 worth of work or $300,000 worth of work, if you increase the percentage of the work that they're doing, spending more money, unit rates are affected greatly. Can we stretch that dollar and do more with it? One of the big things that we've talked about is, is Kaysville in a little bit of a hole? And Councilman Adams talked about reconstruct work, and that's absolutely a need. We have major issues in roads that are, do not resuscitate. There's nothing you can do with them. So until you do something with them, it probably doesn't make sense to go put a chip seal on Sunset Drive. I don't know what the lipstick on a pig, I think is the phrase. So we're not going to do that. But looking at this, if you were to stick with current funding, we can estimate the whole of we've got roads that are in a critical need of we've got to do some major work, major investment to bring the RSL back up. I talked with a resident that had put some numbers together, and that was a beneficial discussion with him. And estimates were between 6 and 12 million or so. So going somewhere in the middle of, if it's 9 million to get out of the hole that we're in, getting to the point where, hey, can we focus majorly on maintenance? And there's always going to be reconstruct needs, there's always going to be rehab needs, but can we largely focus on maintenance, which is cheaper? With current funding, that's about 7 years out to get that $9 million worth of work done. The potential funding of adding the road fee and the $1.2 million in general fund transfer accomplishes that same feat in about 3 years. So get it done faster, get moving, get it out of the way, and focus on keeping good roads in good shape.
Can I interrupt you?
Please, please.
So when would Sunset be rebuilt?
Sunset. So we've got design going on Sunset. There's a lot that goes into that, but I'd love to see it at least partially done next year. So not this summer, but Sunset.
Shepherd.
Shepherd is a road that we're doing design on right now as well.
That's the West Kaysville Belt Route.
Yeah, part of it.
So, yeah, roads where there's a significant need. Mutton Hollow, significant need there.
Which one?
Mutton Hollow.
Mutton Hollow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so roads that need attention, and we'd love to start attacking those next year. Obviously, I'd love to do a road like Sunset all in 1 year, but is it something that we have to split into phases, et cetera? There's a lot of curb gutter sidewalk work that need to go on with the roads, and that's something that we want to do. We want to do more. We want to be better about what we're doing. I want to get to the point where I'm able to look at my time in the city and see, gosh, as I've worked with other great staff and other professionals in industry, we've got great roads throughout town. We've got curb gutter sidewalk on public roads, and people have safe surfaces to drive on, to walk on, to get around town and make Kaysville look great. So anyway.
All right.
Ask him a question.
Councilmember Page.
For some reason, she forgets my name all the time. Hey, I guess, Josh, just a comment or ask you a question. Are we committed to maintenance?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Here's the thing that scares me more than anything. We get all the political pressure to reconstruct and do all these things. Well, the facts are, if we really want to get out of this hole and make sure, we got to maintain the stuff that we put in. And I know this is hard for citizens to see this. I mean, every city that develops a plan like this, you get people griping constantly of, hey, they just laid that road down, and here they are 2 years later, they're putting a seal coat on it, or they're putting a chip coat on it, or whatever. Well, the thing is I think they need to be educated and understand that that's how it works. If we want that road to last 30 or 40 years, that's what you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll just be in the same old bucket down the road if we don't make sure that we completely stick to our maintenance, even if we don't have the complete funds to do all the reconstruction down the road. Sometimes you have to limp on some of these roads, and it's a funding issue. And I guess my big thing is I just want to make sure that we get the plan and we stick with it, to make sure, because that is how we save money down the road, and that's how we're going to have better roads in the future.
Yeah, so LTAP, to that point, kind of talked about this tricky balance of, you don't want to focus all of your attention on putting out fires and rehab, reconstruct. You don't want to focus all of your attention on preventative maintenance. Good roads will stay good, but you'll never do anything about roads that are in bad shape. So you've got to find a good balance that works for the city with the funding that you've got, but you've got to commit to both. You can't just, there's nothing we can ever do about Sunset, and in 10 years that'll turn back into a dirt road from all the traffic. And you can't say, my wife would agree, I live on Sunset, and I get the question a lot at home. So, but yeah, the same thing with the road 500 East, as we go and repave that surface last year. Brand new surface, we want to take care of that. We don't want to let that go. The best condition that road was ever in was the day it was compacted, and it will just deteriorate. Granted, it's not immediate drop off.
That's right.
But that pavement performance curve, we want to give attention to very cost-effective methods for maintenance. It is cheaper, quite a bit cheaper, but still make sure that we are being balanced and fair and equitable with our efforts, with our funds, and making sure, even not wanting to split West Kaysville from East Kaysville and only focusing there, and that's some feedback that we've heard before.
Hey, just one more question for him while he's there. This is your honest opinion. The thing is, I talked to Dean, and I guess, the money we have in our unrestricted funds right now, we're making about 0.8%, is that right? A little higher. On our savings or whatever. And I guess the question I have for you, if we transfer that money now, and I think, Shane, we can do that, we have to determine how much we'd want to transfer from that area to put to roads. Is that something that you could use and actually be using that money this summer, or do we go to the budget? Because if we wait till budget time to say, okay, we're going to transfer X amount of dollars into it, we're not going to see that benefit until the following summer. Isn't that correct?
I believe so, yeah. So the road season would be coming to a conclusion, and those funds would then be part of the 20.
I mean, now's the planning time for the summer. I guess the question I have is what's the better use for that money? To make 8%, or what's it going to cost to put in a road in 19 versus the summer of 18? I guess that's the question we need to ask ourselves.
Can I say both? It might sound like a cop-out, but there are absolutely funds. Hey, while you're in the area, if we focus on this as well, or I've got this critical need that funds have opened up and something that would be maybe smaller and pushed to the next year, I can now bring in and get it done now. The limitation, things like planning, getting the engineering done, is there coordination that needs to be done with homeowners and residents on property acquisition, whatever. Absolutely, we can use funds. The question is how much, but we're hungry, we want to go, we want to move, and we want to get a lot done. And, you know, this year we're doing some substantial reconstruct projects. We're also doing a substantial amount of preventative maintenance projects, going in and seal coating roads that were paved last year, which to us, as we've talked to people, it makes sense. At first it was, well, why don't we wait a few years? Well, that road is never going to be any better than it was the day it was born. So maintain it from that point and start your pavement performance plan, improvement plan. And the LTAP recommended an RSL of a road is about 20 years. We'd like to be at least 30. We think if we're smart and judicious with what we're doing, we can get at least to 30. Can we get 35? Can we get 40? That I don't know, but gosh, if we were going to that point and beyond, I'd be absolutely tickled pink. So.
Okay. Councilmember Adams.
I don't disagree with the maintenance at all, but as one of now 2 Southwest Quadrant representatives of constituency, I have to disagree a little bit with, and I've got a background in this, of slurry sealing the very next year. Sometimes it's okay to let that road relax a little bit. Now take it for opinion for whatever it's worth, but that is a big gripe throughout the city. And I have to say, it's easy for a council member to say that who just got a brand new road last year and say, well, just keep maintaining mine. But we've got dire needs, as you know. I don't even need to say more about it. And if a road needs to relax for a couple years, which in my opinion, actually, you let some of that immediate cracking happen for the first 12 or 24 months, and then we crack, seal, and slurry, then if we slurry it immediately and that road is still kind of finding its equilibrium, it splits. Mm-hmm. So I just throw an opinion in there that I don't think any resident would be mad if we waited 2.5 years for a slurry. But I've got to throw in representation for the people of the west side of the city. And I will also represent the people of Mutton Hollow. If those are the worst roads, which I agree with you, I think they are too, but I believe there's a distinction between those roads. Maybe Mutton Hollow is a mill and pave, but Mutton Hollow does have something. They have curb, gutter, and sidewalk, and they have full right-of-way. We do not have that. On the whole main route to get through West Kaysville, other than Deseret Drive, but Sunset and Shepherd service, I would argue, more of the residences than Deseret Drive does. We don't have that, and now we have schools down there. So we've got safety needs, we've got widening needs, and, I'll throw another plug in for you to be creative with where you get your money from. There's $1.3 million in the impact fee category right now, and I don't, Dean and I were talking, and I don't think there's anybody who couldn't stand before and say, yeah, that fits the bill of impact fee money. Well, I know there's percentages, but I think Shepherd and Sunset are in there. And if there's a way we can modify that, let's do it. But I've got to stand, and take a stand and stand for them. It's, and I know you're right there with me on this. So I'm not preaching at you. I'm preaching with you. Yeah. That we've got to get some serious attention for that, even if it means a seal coat and a slurry coat on another area of the city waits for a minute or two, because we're building steam. We'll get to that, and those roads relaxing, I think it's actually good to let them relax for a minute.
I don't think the two positions have to be mutually exclusive of each other, and I think that speaks to the point that I was talking about earlier. Is we can't just have this blanket plan for everything. There's got to be yearly ongoing discussion. A road 600 West, we paved that last year, and because the budget numbers didn't make sense, we're not sealing that this year. So it's not a cut and dry, this is what we do, there's no bones about it. We want to make things make sense. We've got to tailor it to the needs of the roads, we've got to tailor it to the funds that we have available, we've got to tailor it to the needs of the residents. and tailor it to just what makes sense. So absolutely we want to do that. We want to be creative. We've got Dominion Gas working on a large project in the city right now. And because we held them to a commitment that they made to us on 400 West, they said, look, we aren't going to be able to make this commitment. We wanted to go in and do pavement work on 400 West. We said, look, well, we've got to hold you to it. This is our plan. This is what we've planned on. They said, look, if you will give us time, we will pay for 100% of the cost to pave that road the following year. So we want to be creative. We want to look for opportunities of, hey, you know, does it make sense to do this instead? Wait a little bit, whether it's waiting for maintenance, etc. We don't want to neglect people. And I would argue, not argue, but agree with the point. We want West Kaysville to have representation, and we want East Kaysville to have representation, and North Kaysville and South Kaysville to have representation. And that's what we're here to try and do, is to meet the needs of the city as a whole with the mission statement. So,
Mayor, with that's just over 20 minutes on
yes,
that presentation.
Thank you. And I do want, we have 10 minutes left. So, thank you, Josh.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think we can continue to work with Josh and get more ideas, but I think that was a pretty good overview. Yeah. All right.
If we have questions, we can keep the discussion going. So.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, Josh knows.
Yes. All right. So if it's okay, we thank you very much. We'll move on to our next item, if that's all right. Okay. All right. So I wanted to touch on the items in the executive summary that were bullet pointed out. So if we can just get people's feedback on these, then we'll be ready to give it to staff to bring back in April. Remember, we're not going to be having a meeting the first week in April, so this will be coming back the third week in April. So we'll have plenty of time to think on it, etc., and have it come back pretty awesome. All right. So if it's okay, I'm just going to jump in here. So we wanted final amounts for residential road utility charge, including 2 separate charges for multi and single family residences. So how are we feeling about having the 2 different charges? Everybody agrees that
staff gave some great supporting information for me last council, so I personally
so
appropriate.
Everybody okay with that? Except for
I don't like it.
You don't like it? Okay.
Expand.
Go ahead.
I just I know I can't disagree with what you say. You know, they have the numbers in the studies. I did call Fruit Heights today.
Mm-hmm.
They just do flat everybody. But in all fairness, they only have 2, literally 2 multifamily units in the whole city.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what they told me today. I just laughed. I'm like, oh, okay. They just
Not
do
like
flat
we have
though,
a
so I'm
ton.
sticking with there.
Low-income housing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So
we have a lot more. So.
All right. So do we have consensus that we go with the 2 different rates? Yes. Yes. You say no.
Probably more would change. Yeah.
Okay. And how about you? Flat?
I could go either way, but hey, I'm fine.
Okay.
Whatever.
Okay. So when an ordinance comes back on action, if it has 2 different rates, okay, is that what we're asking for then?
I think, yeah, I'll just stick with that. But
Okay.
I agree with that based on the data that was presented.
Okay. So you got that?
Yeah.
2 different rates.
And just keep in mind that Farmington did a different methodology.
Yeah.
So we used
Farmington,
the trip counts and.
He was talking about
Fruit Heights.
Fruit
Heights.
Heights.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I thought you
that's
said
okay.
Farmington.
But
Yeah, I was
Fruit
going to say.
Farmington was
I
flat
might
rate.
have said Farmington, and I'm sorry.
No, you said Fruit Heights. You said Fruit Heights.
Yeah, I think you did.
But Farmington is flat rate. That's what
Okay.
you're asking.
All right. So last time we visited this, we had consensus, but not a strong consensus, to include public use. I know that James and, Councilmember Hanson and Councilmember Adams are a strong no on that. Other council members, are you still feeling good about including public use?
Yes.
No. Okay. You just let us know so that the staff knows what to put in there.
I will be very transparent. I was waiting on some additional information from the school district. I thought they would get back to us with more information that would have really helped influence my decision. I haven't heard back yet on that, unless anybody else has that wants to share. I did engage with them and told them I would look forward to a letter. They talked to Shane as well, and I haven't heard anything. That's where my hesitation is coming from.
Okay. Shall we include it? And it's a month away before we actually vote on it.
We can modify, right? This is,
yeah. All right. So include for now.
We got time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Include for now. All right. So I like so when we're talking about, I think I was the one pushing for sunset provision. Let's just strike that. I think Councilmember Barber made a good point. It's just semantics. So let's go. What I heard was people felt like if we reviewed this every year, that would be a good thing. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay. So, and in that annual review, we would hope this is okay, Josh, but we would like a list of deliverables, like what roads we're thinking of hitting that next go round. Okay. Yeah, and then and also what went out, what came in, etc. And then also a discussion at that time if we were going to need to increase, decrease, remove, or maintain the fee. All right. Does everybody feel comfortable with that? Yep. Okay. Yes.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Recap on that.
Yes. So when we're doing the annual review, it would include a list of deliverables provided by our Public Works Director, a thorough accounting of the income and expenses for that utility fund, and also looking again, do we need to increase, decrease, maintain, remove the fee? So every year, look at it. Right? Okay.
We're not calling it, but basically it just sounds like a one-year sunset to me.
Yes, that's what it sounds like.
Evaluating on a yearly basis.
Call it what you will. I don't care what the word is.
And that's fine. I mean, again, I like what's happening. I like just, again, whether you say sunset or just every year we're saying, do we remove the fee? And,
yeah.
I think what we're saying, at least.
We're just reviewing.
Or adjust it, yeah. But we're justifying the need on a yearly basis.
Say that again.
It will be part of our annual financial statements every year, and the review takes place with the budget process every year. So it'll be just like any other enterprise fund.
Okay.
Well, I disagree with that because I think what we're going to do is a little bit special in this case because I feel like that's what you guys have been asking for. Right. You've asked for a little bit more. We do review every fee every year, and we would do that same review. But I think in this case that we're going to probably have to do that in a little bit more of a public process, and instead of doing it maybe at the Saturday meeting where we have a budget retreat, we need to do it here. Maybe we have a public hearing if you want to, but I feel like we're setting this a little bit more of a little different standard.
Okay.
And truthfully, a higher standard than any,
Well,
even
hopefully in
property
that
tax.
review, we could couple in the budget review.
Okay.
We talked about earlier.
And I'm going to...
All funding sources reviewed simultaneously.
Okay, let me call on you. Let me do my job. Thank you. All right, Councilmember Gordon.
I just say really quickly, words do have meaning, and sometimes we tend to get a little lazy. We all do it with words. I want to really hesitate to just call this the same as a sunset. We're reevaluating every time, but sunset suggests that it's going to end for sure. And I just don't think we know that. I mean, certainly I would be way open if the whole model changes and the state and we no longer have the need for the road fee, sure. And that's why we reevaluate. But to say it sunsets is pretty much saying on such and such a date, this date, it will end. So. Okay.
And mind at the time. So, and clarification, this is going... How do people feel about this being an enterprise fund, not just a fund within the general fund? Good?
I think that's good.
Good? Yeah. Good over here?
So that changes because it can't be used for anything else,
correct.
Right?
Exactly.
So, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Good? Okay. I'll take non-committal. All right. And, okay, here's something that we haven't discussed before. I think it was mentioned, but we haven't fully discussed it. How about, can somebody make a motion to extend the meeting to the end of our
So moved.
agenda?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. All right. So clarification on whether we assess the fee on ourselves. So I'd like to hear people's thoughts on that. Councilmember Garn.
Sorry, I do think that the city should not do what it, so we have several enterprise funds. Most of them, there's an accounting. So if you look on the, for the financial statements, it will show the amount of usage that the city, I'm in favor of showing the amount of usage within this enterprise fund, just like we do in the other enterprise funds. However, I'm not in favor of actually a cash transfer, because it gets to the same double taxation argument of SB 120 in counties, is that you're just paying it, you're taking it out of one pocket and putting it into the other. It's a futile exercise. So rather than actually transferring the cash for the city impact on the roads, we should just account for how much we think that impact is, but not actually do a cash transfer.
So what does that?
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you. What does that do to the city? If we, where does that go? Does that get deducted from that 3.5 million? Like where? What does that do?
So there's a line, and Dean can answer this better than me, but if you look on the enterprise fund, there's a line in brackets that, isn't there, Dean, that shows and you can see that on each enterprise fund. The only enterprise fund that's different, because of an interpretation of Proposition 5, it actually wasn't in the proposition, where actually a cash transfer of, I think last year, $199,000 from the general fund to the electric enterprise fund. And so I would not want to do that same thing. I'd want to do like we do for the other enterprise funds and just state what the amount of usage is rather than actually make a cash transfer.
So it just states, it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't get deducted from anything else. It's just so we know that it's there. And
that's right.
Okay.
I think that's important to know what impacts are.
Yeah.
You know.
Dean, can you speak to that?
Yeah, it's called a non-reciprocal transfer. So it shows the value of that service, but there's no cash transferred with it on the financial statements. Is that what you're referring to, Jake?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember Adams.
I disagree on the grounds that earlier I stated, well, the slide's gone, but I do like the direction that we're going with, putting tax money into the roads, finally. But I disagree on what Councilmember Garn is saying, because I think with the current state of the roads, with how bad they are, I think we need a bigger commitment from the city, more than just a one-time, okay, here's $1 million, so you all feel like we're being, doing our best. But I'd like a commitment of it if we're going to do it. We're already doing that with the power fund, so either take the $200,000 back from the power fund, don't pay for the the city's light bill, put that $200,000 towards the roads. Just speaking in theory here, or let the city pay the road fee too, which would basically, I think to your point, it would create like another expense to the city, which I'm fine with because it shows commitment. It says you're going to pay that, and it's if the general fund keeps growing for 3 years, it's grown on that trend almost over $600,000 a year. It just means that that money can go other places, and I think it's important for the residents to have that money go towards roads instead of coming out of their pockets. So I would disagree on that point. I think let the city bear the burden. We're looking at charging the churches, we're looking at charging the schools, we're looking at charging county, which Councilmember Garn, I read the same article as you did. The state says no, you can't do that. But heaven forbid we're not going to charge ourselves. And I have actually been milling on this for a week or two. I think it shows commitment, like, no, we'll pay the fee too, and that money will be dedicated to roads too, so that we are shoulder to shoulder with the people.
Okay. So I was going around getting people's feedback. Councilmember Barber.
I would just ask staff for their recommendation. What would you recommend we do for this?
Well, I think it really becomes insignificant. I mean, you look at there are 4 or 5 buildings in the city. If you look at this building and say it's the highest use rate anyway, it's $9 per month. We're talking $72 per year for this building. And you times that by 5, we're talking $300 a year. I mean, it's really a non-issue, I think.
Got parking
but
lots.
Symbolic.
Parking
it would
lots.
be symbolic. Right.
It's based on the size of the building.
Right.
Well, Jake threw out the figure 500,000. So
I did.
I just saw. Or
I
somebody
did.
saw
And
some
I'm the
dollar
worst
signs.
accountant ever. Don't
Take
listen
a
to me.
permanent $500,000 transfer to roads
Don't
for
listen
10
to
years.
me.
I need
on that.
I need to clarify that because it is per 1,000 square feet. So this one's, 10,000 square feet, so it would be about $90 a month for this building.
Okay.
Yeah, but think about all the businesses who feel that way too, and the schools and the churches.
Okay.
So.
All right. And then Councilmember Hanson, thoughts?
I'm indifferent. You lose the flexibility. I think you brought up the power, Councilmember Adams, the power problem that we've committed to pay that in, and then if we want to use it, there's no flexibility. On the flip side, you're right. It shows that we're vested in this. I'm just
not sure yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember.
You know, my opinion, I see both sides. I think a lot of it is what's it going to cost to administer that, to transfer the thing? Is it going to eat away at part of that? Are we creating just busybody work to, I guess that's the thing I'm asking.
I'll rest my case if we up C Road Fund for 10 years indefinitely.
Okay, we can't do that because we get it from the state.
Oh, okay, sorry, the road fund, excuse me.
Yeah.
The road fund, I'll rest my case.
I think how I understood, as we are doing this, I think when we do the annual review, we'll probably look at, okay, how much can we afford to move over from the surplus fund every year, right?
And I'm not trying to I'm not deterring at all. I agree, you're right. And as we saw Josh present, we're not keeping up. So as a council, we've got to take a cold, hard look how to bring those graphs, those lines back into alignment.
Sure. And so I think
Band-Aid isn't.
Could we look at our contribution from the surplus fund as our contribution?
Oh yeah, it's
Okay.
hundreds of thousands.
Yes.
I'll trade you that petty.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, really.
Right.
Like 1.2
so
million.
that's what
person.
I think that's how we pay our share.
I think that's
is from surplus. Do you feel
Agree.
comfortable with that?
Sorry,
that would be
not
good.
not at all.
You're not comfortable
I've
with
been
that?
raising my hand the whole time to.
Yes,
other
I
people
am
have been
so
talking.
Sorry, I jumped in.
That is true.
He's right. Okay, please, Councilmember Garden.
Okay, I do feel very strongly about this, and I'm very philosophically opposed to the transfer, and here's why. We only do it in one other enterprise fund. It's taking general fund money and like impressing it for a certain purpose. And in the electric fund, for example, if you stop transferring, which in the next budget session, it only becomes relevant here, I'm going to argue for not transferring that to the electric fund. That's going in the wrong direction. If you take another enterprise fund and start transferring, money that you guarantee that you're going to transfer that general fund money into it, or the other direction, you're going to transfer money out of the water fund. For example, I totally agree with Josh that you should use it if you're making a hole in the road and the water line caused that, but I'm definitely not for taking water fund surplus money that should be managed separately and transferring that carte blanche over to work on roads. And it's the same principle. The general fund, it's our responsibility as a council and the way government is designed to decide through the budget process in consultation with the public many times, especially on big issues, the direction of the city, that the council has a responsibility to decide to do what to do with that general fund money. So if you go the other direction and stop transferring that $200,000 from the general fund every year into the electric fund, you can use that money if you want. $200,000, that's every year, and that's guaranteed because that's artificial. That's not based on the economy. It's guaranteed you could use that $200,000 a year for roads if you wanted to, if you budget prioritize it, if you stop paying it to the electric fund. So paying something into the new road fund from the general fund, on an ongoing basis, a set amount is totally the wrong direction. So I'm very strongly philosophically opposed to that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I hear that. Okay.
Does the city pay for other services it uses aside from power, sewer, water? Does it put money into those funds? I'm sorry. Does the city put money into sewer, water, storm drain too? Do they have to pay their bill for all that too, like they pay their power bill?
No,
It's just the power?
Just power.
Just a quick comment. I mean, aside from police and fire, I don't know anything that's more important to people than roads. So when they see millions of dollars sitting, doing nothing, idle, that can legally be transferred, that's their money, and they ought to have a right to say, I want the roads fixed. Aside from police and fire, I think roads are the most critical thing that we provide.
Councilmember Hanson.
I'd put water in there too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's in the roads. It's underneath them.
Did you say water?
Yeah, water. I don't know if I'm.
If we're going to get literal, I'll accept the literalness. But, yeah.
That's what I just literally. Yeah, just the necessities.
Yeah.
All right. So, coming back, whether or not we're going to specifically assess a fee to the city, or are we going to make a contribution in the form of $200,000, perhaps.
That's kind of separate, I think.
I think but ethically, he can accept that.
Prop 5
it's
not
not
going
totally
on there.
separate.
It's not separate at all. It's how you handle your enterprise funds. Do you do it consistently, or do you pick one and say, I'm going to steal from this one, I'm going to add to that one, I'm going to play all these games? You're getting way too complicated. And, that's part of the idea of the enterprise fund is you manage it separately from your general fund. Now you've got cash flows. That was the whole point of Prop 5 is you don't have transfers going back and forth. Now you want to add more transfers.
I think you're totally correct that we keep
transfers.
We do it the same way either place. So I would say no.
Thank you.
Charging the city for roads, just like we're going to just ignore the need to send it back to the power.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams.
Thanks. I'd just like to say transfers that aren't bound by Prop 5 legislation, though, Councilmember Garn. Okay, it's not there. If you want to make legislation, if you want Prop 6, 7, and 8 for water, sewer, storm, and whatever, then do it. But that legislation doesn't exist for those.
And that's
or
20 minutes.
Having the city pay it.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I apologize for interrupting. It's 20 minutes on that discussion.
Okay. All right. Why don't we do this? I don't feel like we have consensus on this.
I think we're pretty close, actually.
Pretty close. All right. So
just go around like you did before.
Okay. Do we assess ourselves?
I'm okay. Just have a discussion with no.
No, still assess it.
No.
No.
Okay. So it sounds like consensus is no, we won't assess ourselves. All right. Okay. Does that give you the direction you need?
I think I wrote down notes for all those. Okay. We'll have an ordinance prepared at the next meeting.
All right. Do we need to make a motion at all to move this to the action item, or?
I mean, we probably should.
Sure.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
Never hurts.
I'll make a motion that we move the road fee discussion to an action item at next council meeting.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved by Councilmember Barber and seconded by Councilmember Garn. Let's start with Councilmember Garn.
Aye.
Aye.
No further comment?
No, you have to.
That's a no.
Oh, no, we could have comment.
sorry.
We could.
You're right.
Comment.
You're right.
Okay,
You're right. I'm so sorry. Comment.
Are we entirely done discussing the effects this has on businesses? So is that solidified? Have you guys are all?
No.
Okay.
We didn't discuss the business element. We discussed housing. I just want to know if that's solidified.
Yes.
We're not talking about that anymore?
I think we covered that in a previous session. But
there's still, you said before when I said about the churches, or sorry, the school thing, we have a month to work on this.
Right. But I really want, as much as we can, to give direction to staff. So at this point, all right.
I'm just curious. You don't have to answer.
No, I don't want you to.
Where the ball is at on the court.
Let's just go on.
I think we're just in discussion. We're in discussion.
We're in discussion.
Post
all right.
Motion.
Okay.
We're in discussion on the current motion as it stands.
All right.
And anyone can.
Councilmember Hanson.
I wasn't here, but just my recollection would be 2 against. I don't know. I couldn't speak for. I was against, but at least 3 were for. So I mean, there
Correct.
was enough majority.
There was consensus, right? And Have you changed your mind
On what?
on business?
On business.
Including businesses in the road fee. Do you want to still charge?
Keep it where they're at.
Okay. Are you still in favor?
Keep business, definitely.
Okay, Councilmember Barber.
I think there's just a little bit of clarification that we have, but that was.
You're still in favor of including businesses with the 369 plan? Okay. So I think we still have consensus to include businesses, all right? Any other items that people want cleared up before we vote on this? Anything else? All right.
Seems like the only thing, just to clarify, the only thing left hanging now is public use.
Public use. I think we have tentative consensus on that. We're waiting for a letter from the school district for Councilmember Barber. Okay. And if she receives that, she may change her mind. All right?
Or any other additional information.
Something. All right. Okay. All right. So now we're voting. So Councilmember Garn.
Aye.
Councilmember Barber.
Aye.
Councilmember Adams.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Okay. Motion passes 4-1. Okay. Great discussion, guys. Thank you. All right. We now will move to call to the public. Did we have anybody sign up for call to the public?
No.
Okay. Nobody signed up for call to the public.
Oh.
So we'll.
We didn't have, there wasn't a call to the public sign. There were just 2 issues out there that had papers. There was no call to the public page.
It was all out there, but maybe he missed seeing.
Okay. Come on up. Let's hear you.
I'll be quick. Brig Lewis, and just for what it's worth, last Sunday's paper, Weber County transferred $5.5 million from the road fees to fund a flood control project. Interesting. That is, the state legislature is after them. The citizens are after them. There's some problems going on when we start passing around these fees. If Kaysville City owes the power fund $200,000, they should pay that. They shouldn't be able to withhold it. Otherwise, Proposition 5 will go on. I appreciate the discussion that's said we need to review and revisit these issues every year. We need in Kaysville to address our needs based on the available dollars as well as the available needs. I've heard tonight a couple of people say, well, we've got these fees and they can't be moved. Oh, yeah? I watch that. We move them around here in Kaysville, too. We need to be careful, otherwise there will be a Proposition 6, 7, and 8. The city has dipped into these funds in the past, and they continue to do so. If this road fee goes forward, and I don't know if it's going to apply to the businesses or if they've changed how they were going to apply it. If it still applies to the businesses, that means that the 4 people in my house, that we spend roughly $400 a month on food. That means that Bowman's, in order to pay that bill, would have to raise my food bill by approximately $35 to $40 a month. That's enough money to pay my gas money to go to Layton.
Thank you. All right. All right. Council member reports. Anything on power?
Nothing for this meeting.
Okay. Community development? No. Nothing. Public Works?
I know this is late, so I'm going to make it real quick. But interesting, 3 water line replacements on 150 South, Barnes Park area, 1000 East, near Fruit Heights, Market, and Burrow Street. So there will be some construction, as Josh mentioned, on those 3 areas. And so they'll, I think they work hard not to interrupt businesses as they're doing those projects and turning off water at the appropriate times. And then also Public Works is looking at, that could come before the council at some point, a software system called CityWorks to get rid of kind of all the paper requisitions that might get stuck on somebody's desk, where you could monitor all the jobs and don't have to come back into the shop to find out. And so that's a huge efficiency gain, I think, there to be able to use that. And also continue to look at, the various asbestos concrete pipes in town and look at appropriate replacements for those.
All right, thank you. Let's see, multiple things.
Hope we get them all.
Yeah.
Huge thank you to our Public Works Department and all of the city for our sesquicentennial celebration today. It was fantastic, and just I hope
Parks and Rec.
Oh, what did I say?
Public Works.
Public Works.
But we thank them also.
Thank you. We thank them also. I'm sure they got us here on those roads, so thank you. Anyway, so thank you to all of them. Thank you to everybody that came. Be sure to go watch the song. It was awesome and still stuck in my head. And the Easter egg hunt is coming up in a couple weeks at Barnes Park, so attend that.
I think it's the 20...
No, it's the 2nd.
I got an email. I thought it was
Saturday
March
of
29th or something like that.
April.
Oh, who knows? It could be. We'll have to see.
Please pause. We'll get there.
We'll get there.
And then be watching for some updates for our summer festivities that are coming out. So,
some new traditions coming your way.
Thank you.
Just an update. I was able to attend a national conference, get some training at National League of Cities. I think the most beneficial part of it was working with other council members, mayors from across the country, trying to get best practices. How do you handle this problem? Met some great people from Selma, Alabama, Lacey, Washington. That's the most productive way is just talking to people who are dealing with similar situations that we have. So it was very helpful, and also we were able to meet with our federal delegation, express concerns that we would have, and I think it's valuable and important to have Kaysville's voice heard on the national level. So I appreciate the time that I was able to spend there. So. And
March 31st.
Thank you. See, it was March.
I can't do numbers or dates in public. That's the next ordinance.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you. And now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you. No, there isn't.